Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. Man, I've got an incredible guest today. I'm with Oliver Leiber, super successful producer, writer, composer, brilliant just guy about music and about the business. And he happens to be also a very cool person. I want to, before I get into his background, I just want to thank our mutual friend and total badass, Keith Nelson, founder of Buck Cherry and another badass LA producer for hooking us up. Keith, thanks very much for all your support as always. All right, cliff notes on Oliver. Oliver Leiber, successful producer, songwriter, musician. He's had tremendous success writing and producing top hits for Paula, Abdul, The Corrs, Aretha Franklin, Beth Hart, who was a guest here a while back, Adam Lambert, Kesha, Gavin DeGraw, Foreigner, Dave Koz, Sheena Easton, Brian Ray, Jennifer Page, Quinn Sullivan, and Silvertide at the time, who had Nick Perry as their lead guitarist, who was on the show here quite a while back as well, and others. He was also a touring and session guitarist for Rod Stewart and Oliver's dad. If his last name sounds familiar, it should. It's because his dad was Jerry Leiber, who was one half of the famous Brill Building songwriting team of Leiber and Stoller. Dude, I'm so glad to get together with you. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All righty. You started off playing drums, which you still play drums quite a bit. But at age 11, you switched to guitar. You got a 72 Martin D18, which you later traded for a Guild D55, which you still have.
Yeah.
And then you got a Walnut SG as your first electric. What prompted you to switch to guitar?
Well, the messaging from my dad, he kind of, when I was younger, and we all idolize our dads no matter what they do, right?
And
sure.
Or don't do.
or don't do. My dad was a great storyteller, and he wasn't one to ruin a good story for a few detail or truths, and pretty much had painted himself as this like drummer to me when I was a little kid, and talked about, I don't know. So I wanted to be like him. Right. And so I wanted to be a drummer. And so I got my first kit at 8, and started playing. And kind of at a certain point, he was saying, yeah, but you'll never be able to write songs as a drummer. I'm like 10, 11. I'm just happy to be holding the sticks and sitting on the.
You'll never be anything.
It's kind of like, it says a lot about the messaging that I got from him. But it was like, you'll never write this. So I'm sort of confused. And I'm looking at him, and he's like, if you don't play an instrument, where you can play chords, you'll never write a song, Anyway, so that's what sort of planted the seed. And my brother, I have an older brother, is 15 months older. He actually had a guitar. I think he was going to be the guitar player, and he had it lying around, and I picked it up. And it was one of those things where, and I think you hear this a lot with brothers who are musicians, where one of them is trying to play an instrument, the other one sort of picks it up in like a couple of days that they're better. And it's like, clear, you're meant to play that. So it kind of happened with the guitar. I mean, my brother's a great piano player, keyboard player, but I sort of picked up this guitar that was around the house at around 11, and also started playing that. So I never gave up drumming, obviously, but I sort of added guitar to my, to the list of instruments that I was playing.
Yeah, I hear that story quite often with the brothers.
But it's funny, man, because I still, to this day, it's weird, don't really think of myself as a guitar player. I mean,
really?
It's weird. In my mind, I'm a drummer, and I play way more guitar and have for years now. But in my mind, I'm a drummer that sort of plays guitar on the side. I mean, that's my mentality. Yeah.
Is that like, is your heart more in line with drumming, or?
I don't know if it's more in line with drumming. It feels like something that came more naturally in some ways to me. Maybe because I started, I don't know, 8 to 11. It's only 3 years, but somehow I started at a point where it just, I never had to think about it. Like, I don't remember struggling with drums.
Sure.
learning period, that hump that you have to get over. So for me, it just feels like this thing that was naturally just there. Whereas guitar, I really had to, it's always been like trying to get these fingers to do what I want them
Who
to do.
doesn't? I mean, who doesn't?
Right.
What guitar player doesn't? I mean, it's not an easy instrument, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't
That's
totally
interesting, man.
explain it, but yeah, I've always felt like a drummer who plays guitar.
Well, you did learn how to write songs.
I did a drummer who writes songs. Yeah.
Touche. Tell me about discovering your superpower at camp.
My superpower. I wrote that down. Well, so I had a drum set. I had my little Ringo kit. Although I picked just the wrong colors. I picked the bronze Strata Ludwig kit, which in retrospect, if you could go look back, Ringo had the black Strata one, the classic Ringo kit. And anyway, I picked the wrong.
What a faux pas.
What?
What a faux pas.
Bad call. But I had that kit, and my brother and I would jam in the apartment, in New York when we were 8, 9, 10. And we got sent away to summer camp, and there was a talent show. And I think I was probably 9 or 10. And, we played the talent show. And I think, he had a Farfisa and a tiny little amp that was probably just grinding away, just distorted. And we had a few like jams that we would do, just 3-4 chord jams. And I think we must have done it for about 10 minutes, the same 3 chords or whatever. And we ended. And after the talent show, just, it was a boys' camp on one side and the girls' camp on one side. And it was just, I was sort of like, the girls came flocking, is that a word? They flocked.
Yeah. Flocking. Yeah. They flocked to you.
They flocked. And also the guys. And all of a sudden, I just realized like, oh, this is something that I can do that, somehow sets me apart,
Yeah.
And yeah, I sort of got that validation and that rush from that I had never had before. And it sort of just light went off in my head, which is like,
yeah,
oh yeah, this is what I want to do,
Well, also, and we'll talk about this later to any extent you're comfortable, you got attention.
Yeah.
And I read your bio, you weren't necessarily getting that attention at home. So
Yeah.
that's huge.
That's very true.
Yeah. At that young of an age, that's a huge thing, Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in a household, again, where, my dad was a big deal, and oftentimes with personalities and guys like that are that successful, they can be kind of about themselves,
Sure.
And that sort of was the case with my old man. So very much about him. So it was hard to get his attention. I think that's maybe what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And I think really for both my brother and I, the reasons why we picked up instruments in the first place was, I was 8. It's like, you were a drummer, Dad? Okay, I'll be a drummer. Maybe that'll do it,
Right.
Oh, I can't write songs with these things. What do you want me to do? Oh, I'll play guitar. So, I was just sort of kind of tap dancing, trying to get the guys, approval.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello. So really come from him. But yes, like, a lot of attention, positive attention did come from it in other areas.
Yeah. So I
think
totally
I learned
get
that
that.
early on. Yeah.
So then you start playing in bands in high school. You continued in college. And at 17, I thought this was so cool. You took a drum lesson from Bernard Purdie. How the hell did you get hooked up with Bernard, and what was that like?
Right. So, the Steely Dan record had come out with Home at Last on it. And it had that classic Purdie shuffle, that halftime. right?
What a great, all those records of that era from Steely Dan, and especially growing up in New York, they were like,
oh yeah,
it's so awesome. Yeah.
so yeah, and I was really, again, at that point, even though I played guitar, I had an acoustic, and I kind of played in my room, it was really a very closet thing, and I was way more identified with being a drummer at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really into. I'd go to McKell's and watch stuff, and I'd have my face like right up in Steve Gadd's, bass drum there in that club. And, I was living and breathing drumming. And anyway, so I heard that halftime shuffle and drove me crazy. And I was like, how do those triplets keep going? And how do you get that feel? And it was just like magic. And my dad actually, because I think he had recorded with Purdie probably over the years. I don't know how it came into being, because he might have even said I ran into Bernard Purdie, and I don't know how it went down. But when I heard that he knew Purdie, I was like, I have to have a drum lesson with him. I have to learn this one beat that he does, this groove. And somehow it was set up. And I literally, the other day, I was going through, I save everything, right? I'm just a hoarder. And I have a box, and I've got the ticket stubs from Madison Square Garden from 1973.
I have all my ticket stubs.
Sly Stone, the Zeppelin.
Wow, that's amazing. Holy shit.
And
that's nuts.
Crazy. But I had this piece of paper fold up, and it literally said Bernard Purdie and his phone number. I was like, holy shit. That was from that period. So I called him up. He's like, yeah, man, yeah, we can get together. And basically, he had a boom box, and he put a cassette in, and he was like, okay, well, this is how it goes. And he played it. And if you ever seen him at NAMM shows or whatever, he's just got this way about him. I don't know. But he just had me watch. And then he said, okay, and now you can change your kick pattern and still play the same thing with your hands. And then now you can open the hat on the one or on the ands. And he basically just kept playing and went through various permutations of that groove with different kick patterns, different hi-hat opening and closing patterns. And basically, I was like, clicked off the cassette, handed it to me, goes, all right, there you go. Like, figure it out. But
wow.
But
do you still have that cassette?
Man, I don't know. It's got to be somewhere.
That would be cool to revisit. Yeah.
And somewhere in a carton, like, I have so much stuff, that I've never listened to. Somewhere there is a cassette of that lesson.
That's awesome.
I would love to find it.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So that's really cool. So I would assume growing up in the household that you did, a guy like Purdie or anybody else for that matter, you were not starstruck.
Yes and no. Like someone like that or someone like Steve Gadd, like because of how I viewed them, I was definitely like, I would get that feeling like, oh, fuck, that's Steve Gadd, I mean,
the drummer thing.
Bathroom at McKell's. Like, I'm going in, oh, fuck, that's Steve Gadd. Come out of the bathroom. I felt that,
Yeah. Hey guys, this is a project I'm involved with, so if it sounds interesting to you, check it out. If you're a musician, composer, artist, or songwriter, and you've always thought about or wanted to get involved in the profitable world of music licensing, but you just don't know how to go about doing it, then listen up. A new video has just been released that shows you exactly what music licensing is, how to get involved with it, and how to make your first placement. Or if you've already made some placements, you'll also discover how to create a system that lets you make more placements more consistently. This free training video is called Where the Money's Hiding in the Music Business in 2023, and you can find it online at musicreboot.com. This video shows you how to create the financial stability you've always wanted and how to take advantage of the current explosion of opportunities in music licensing due to streaming and the internet. So check it out online now at musicreboot.com.
It's funny, the people that I would get starstruck around are probably not the people that most people would,
Right,
yeah.
right.
More guys that I respected and musicians. It wasn't necessarily stars.
Right. I totally get that. I've had that on the show here.
Were my heroes. I think that's one of the things growing up, because there wasn't a ton of stars come in. They were here and there coming through my dad's living room or whatever. And if I went to hang with him at the Brill Building, I met people over the years. There are definitely people I met, but it wasn't like this just parade of stars that was always happening and coming to the house. So what I loved in growing up, what I witnessed was the record making process. When I go visit Leiber and Stoller at the studio, and I'd watch a rhythm section, and like I fell in love with that part of music. It was like these amazing players that would come in, sort of be handed a chord chart or whatever, and then somehow in the course of 5 to 20 minutes, this thing would happen. It would just, and you'd hear it, and it was an amazing thing. And there were parts players. It wasn't generally flashy. It was just feel. Guys that knew how to stay out of the way of, the vocals, how to stay out of the way of each other, where to, and I fell in love with that. I fell in love with rhythm sections. So someone like Steve Gadd or Bernard Purdie, they were on the Mount Rushmore of
session guys. Yeah, for sure. Rhythm section session guys, particularly. Yeah, for sure. Off the top of your head, Oliver, what can you think of, like, besides Purdie and Steve Gadd, can you think of like a couple of situations where people, session guys that you saw that you're like, holy fuck, I cannot believe I'm watching this guy create something out of nothing, or this gal?
Well, it's Gadd again. I remember being invited to a session. Klaus, is it Ogerman?
Olbermann?
Klaus Ogerman.
Isn't it? Yeah.
There was some session. I don't know how I got invited, but I was like 17 or 18, I think. I don't know.
You're talking about the bass player, right?
No, he was a keyboard player, because what I was going to say is the rhythm section. So I get invited into some session, Midtown, Manhattan. I don't know how I ended up in there. I had seen Gadd play at McKell's. I had never met him, and I had never seen him in the studio. And he was the drummer, and it was like 20-year-old Marcus Miller.
Holy shit.
On bass, who already hadn't produced anything, hadn't made it anyone. And I just remember I just staring in awe at the two of them work out these parts, and it was this incredibly slow groove too, where the slower the groove, the harder it is to like lock in time. There's like, you could read a novel in between quarter notes. It's just like,
sure,
like, how do you get it? And Gadd was so locked in, and they were so locked in. And I remember, and this probably accounted for my smoking, like continuing with my weed smoking well beyond the time I should have, is Gadd was just the whole time, he like joint after joint after joint.
Really?
The whole time while he's recording, and the ashes just like falling on the snare. And he was like, it was like perfect. And every take was immaculate. And of course I got the idea, like, I need to smoke more weed here in order to.
That is dude, I can't even like barely hold a fucking conversation if I'm stoned, let alone play an instrument at any kind of level.
The irony, and it's funny I brought that up. The other name, or one of the other names I found in my little box of things, I was just going through looking for something in particular, Purdie. And then there was Steve Gadd and all his numbers that he had written for me. Ironically, I meet him 10 years later. I'm now like, not quite 10 years later. I'm like 20, maybe 24. Living in Minnesota. I had gone there to get sober, and I meet him. I go to an AA meeting, and in the meeting is, I think he's pretty outspoken about being sober. If I'm outing him, we can edit it out. But
sure.
he's pretty outspoken about it for years and years at this point. Anyway, in the meeting, I show up and this little hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I walk in, and sitting there is Steve Gadd.
Holy, that must have blew your mind.
Blew my mind, and we started talking, and he was so nice, and I was like, "You have no idea. I mean, he probably gets this every day, all day,
Yes.
all day long.
Yeah.
But I did you have no idea how big an influence you've been on." He was so cool. And he was more impressed with the fact that I had been sober at this point, a year or two, I'm not sure. And he gave me his number and he gave me his information. And actually, we stayed in touch. And it kind of blew my mind, because at a certain point when I had success as a producer, I remember him calling me at one point saying, "Hey, man," because he was kind of getting back on his feet. He had really been taken off the rails for a minute. And I remember him calling me one time and just saying, "Hey, man, can we work together? Anything? I'll come play," And I just remember like hanging up the phone, and it was just one of those moments where it's surreal.
Yeah, I understand.
Take it in, like how much I had idolized him, and how this weird full circle of him calling me up and saying, "Hey, I love these records you're making. If you ever want a drummer to play on it," it was just,
yeah, I could totally.
and over the years, I've thought like, "Oh, I would love Steve to play on this. I would love Steve to play on this." For one reason or another, it hasn't happened yet, And
Right.
I think part of it has also been that it's like, I almost feel like I can't call Steve Gadd, I mean,
I can understand that.
Right?
I really can.
I still feel like, like
you're the little kid.
I'm running around in my dad's pajamas.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's hard to get out of the early context at times. It really is.
With him, and we have met, and I've come to gigs with him, and he's like hit me up, and we've run into each other. He's always like, "Dude, call me." But there's that hurdle. I've never really, let's just keep it like this. This is good. I don't know. You might not like the tune, or whatever.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better to have a what's that expression? Sometimes be careful when you meet your heroes.
Yeah, that's what they say. Trust the art, not the artist.
Yeah, I can understand that. I really can.
Yeah.
And also, I have this expression: you can't connect the dots moving forward, and that's one of those things where you're like, all of a sudden, you're like in a meeting with Steve Gadd, and you're like, "How the fuck did this happen?"
I mean, that was just unbelievable. The irony of that was that when I had sort of left New York in the way that I left New York, felt like tail between my legs, shameful, like, just my life sort of imploded at 22, without going to lots of details, flying to the Midwest, ending up in St. Paul and rehab and all of that. It really felt like I felt like my life was sort of at an all-time low,
Yeah.
And what ended up happening career-wise from Minnesota, and that place that I thought was the low point in my life, it represented like, you cannot get any lower than this, St. Paul in the middle of the winter, living near the Schmidt's brewery with like half of the neon sign burnt out. It was just like grim. And that I would meet my heroes, because there's several that and ultimately have my musical career
flourish
on a big scale,
Yeah.
From there. So the whole thing was very counterintuitive. You cannot plan these things in your life.
No, totally. Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's why I always say you can't connect the dots moving forward. And I love hearing stories like that because it always, there's, you gotta have hope somehow, even if it's a little fucking match.
Yeah.
You know, if you keep it burning a little bit, something can come out of it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I was continually amazed and surprised by, because one would think that, you know, with the father that I had and who he was in the music business, right? And living in Manhattan and New York, that all opportunities and connections and things, you know, would spring from that, right? Naturally. And nothing ever came of that particular you know, other than a drum lesson with Purdie, but it all came from a absolute, what felt like a detour in my life, you know?
Yeah.
It's so just, yeah, very unexpected.
I want to talk about that. It's a great story that you have. You hadn't spoken with your dad in years, and you meet with him. And by the way, I didn't talk to my parents for 36 years. I cannot stand people who, let me reframe that. It's not I can't. Many people are often, call your dad, call your mom. If you're not, and that's because like they come from a family where they couldn't imagine, like,
well,
my
and
father
who teaches you that? Your mom and your dad.
Right.
You can't imagine the you know, the programming comes from them.
Right.
Right.
Right. And, you know, I remember when my father called me years and years ago, and I didn't take the call. I didn't want to talk to him. And my son was like, Dad, how can you not talk to your dad? And I was really happy because I said, okay, I fucking did a good job here, you know, but I was like, Nick, I don't expect you to understand it. And I'm sorry if it's causing you stress, but, you know, I can't explain it. But what I was going to say is, you know, there's so many people that have these toxic relationships and like justifiably say, you know what, it's time to split, man, in any whatever. And you always get these people, oh, you only have one mother and father. Well, you know, then why were they such assholes? You know, it's like, you know, so I say that. So when people saying, when I'm, you know, you hadn't spoken to your dad in years, there's a reason why people do. It's not a natural thing to say, I'm going to cut my fucking parents out of my life.
Yeah.
It's, you got to be pushed to levels of like, this is bad.
Yeah.
You know?
And I also think that there's way more society and the consciousness because of 12-step programs and because just in general sort of family systems and are just the general knowledge, you know, that people have about these things is so much greater now. The kids that have grown up the last, you know, but kind of back when I was, you know, going through this and sort of made the decision not to really have any contact with my family for a long time. It wasn't a popular notion. It was hard for people to understand that these relationships could be really toxic. You know,
I could understand that.
You know, the reason why I needed a drink and getting high to survive my family.
I totally get, yes.
Just made it out of there, like on the plane, out of there, you know, by the skin of my teeth. And realizing as I was trying to be sober and get my life together, that there wasn't a lot of support for that at all coming from my family of origin, you know, because in order for people to acknowledge that, they have to acknowledge their own shit. Yeah. Their own shit. Nobody
and their own flaws in contributing to potentially that situation. Right. Yeah. That's a big ask for most people, man.
Yeah.
I want to get into this, but I love the one story you told. You're flying out of town and you're like, I wanted to get buzzed one time, but I made the mistake of drinking airplane wine.
Well, it wasn't even a mistake. It was sadly the last, when I left town, when I left New York to go to Hazelden to treatment.
Yeah.
All they had on the plane was, and, you know, and I had been, again, you know, using hard drugs and whatever, smoking weed and everything up until the moment, the morning that I got on that plane. And all they had was like the screw off, top Paul Masson.
You're like 13 again, going into the bodega.
So sadly, the last like alcohol I ever had, was Paul Masson wine, a little red bottle of wine in July 20th, 1983.
Yeah, that was a funny story. Yeah. Okay, so you hadn't spoken to your dad in years, and this was freaking impressive. So you meet with your dad, and he listens to a song that you have. He hooks you up with
just over the phone.
Oh, over the phone. Okay.
Yeah.
And he hooks you up with Russ Titleman, the famous producer.
Yeah.
And he has Russ listen to this song, and Russ wants to work with you, and he wants to have Chaka Khan record the song.
Yeah.
And when I read this, man, I really respected you, because this is like shows what people are made of. You turned him down because you didn't want to stand on your dad's shoulders.
Yep.
And I really get that. And then instead you said, you work with Paula Abdul instead. You produced her, and she was a complete unknown.
Yep.
But I'd love if you can share the story. I have some questions, but I want you to tell the story first, if you're okay with it.
Sure. So, and I wish I could take all the credit for, yes, I did want to stand on my own, I did get some feedback and some advice, and I was left to sort of weigh it out, but the story goes, I wrote this song called "It's Just the Way That You Love Me," and I sent the demo because I was proud of it, and I sent the demo to my dad just because I wanted him to hear what I was doing. He hadn't heard anything, and I'd been in Minnesota now maybe 3 years or so, and so I think I sent him the demo. And
so this is you starting like first. I'm sorry to cut you off. In the context, you were just first starting to, like, for lack of a better, come back to life.
Yeah.
Okay.
It took a minute, my first, I don't want to go off in the weeds, but my first year and a half in Minnesota after treatment and after halfway house, because I went like 30 days treatment, 6-7 months in a halfway house. And then you
did it right.
I just kept following what was being, recommended. It's like, I've never had a concept of a religious God, but I was taught, look, 3 people that are sober standing in front of you is a power greater than yourself, right? 3 sober people telling you what they see and what they suggest you might do is a power greater. And so that was as much as I could turn my will and my power,
Sure. So if you don't grow up with that, it's a very, very difficult concept to accept. And especially if you didn't grow up with that and you had so much bullshit to deal with.
Yeah.
It's even that much further removed.
Yeah. And particularly where what your example of was an ego, huge ego kind of, that reigned supreme.
Yeah.
Very hard to imagine an actual power, outside.
Right, a higher power. Yeah.
But lose the thread. So yes, it took me a while.
6 or 7 months in a halfway house.
Yeah. And then working kitchen jobs and waiting tables and bussing tables, ultimately becoming like a short order chef. But for a year and a half till I finally started sitting in a little bit in town, and that so it was a slow grow. At the time that this thing happened with the song, it was probably now 2.5 years into this period where I had gotten a guitar at this point and a drum machine, and I had a little Fostex 4-track cassette recorder in my room. I was living in a house with 5 other sober guys, and we each had a room and and working, hourly media labor jobs, and I'd come home and I'd was writing in my room there, and I'd written this song, and I think I sent it to my old man, and simultaneously, one of the guys who had played on it was Paul Peterson, St. Paul Peterson. He had been in The Time, and then he was in a band that Prince put together called The Family, and he was the lead singer in The Family. And somebody had put us together to meet each other. They thought we would, get along, and 2 funky white dudes, I guess. I don't know, thought we had musical commonality, and he had played on the demo, and he took it with him to California because he was making a video, and there was a break in the action and making the video, and they're having lunch, and the choreographer for the video was saying how she was going to make a record. And he was saying, well, what kind of record? And she was like, well, like a Janet record. I love the Minneapolis funk. I love Prince, the Janet thing. And Paul said, I have this cassette that I played on from a friend of mine back in Minneapolis, and it's kind of that thing. It's his song, but you want to hear it? So the choreographer's Paul Abdul. Did I say that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you didn't.
Okay. It was Paul Abdul.
Yeah.
And he played her this song, and she freaked out. She called, Virgin Records, who had signed her, Gemma Corfield, and my phone's getting blown up. Who are you, and what are you doing? And simultaneously, my dad had, I think met Russ Titleman at Elaine's one night, which is where
Elaine's. This is like such New York talk.
Yeah. My dad, if I needed to find my dad, basically from the age of 6 to 17, if I needed to find my dad and I didn't know where he was at Elaine's. Or if I had no money and I needed money, I could go to Elaine. It was home away from home.
Yeah,
which is a whole other. There's stories related to that, but probably at Elaine's one night, at the table that was reserved for you probably ran into Russ, and he handed him this cassette. I don't know entirely because I was in Minnesota. I remember getting a call from Russ Titleman. Now I knew who he was because I knew the records he had produced, and they're some of my favorite records of all time, and Gadd played on a lot of them. So, I was tracking all that. And he goes, hey, man, this is, mind you, I'm still living in a house with 5 other sober guys, working at a restaurant called the Day by Day Cafe.
What an interesting name for people in recovery to be working.
The guy who owned it really he knew that the halfway house was only half a mile away, and he knew that he could get really cheap labor with all the people at the halfway house that needed jobs. So he kind of marketed it a little bit. So we all ended up working at the Day by Day Cafe.
That's pretty funny, man.
There's a funny story around that too. Well, there's too many.
If it's funny and you want to say it, say it.
It's weird. I remember being on my hands and knees, scrubbing the front entryway of the Day by Day Cafe, and door opens, and it's a wind chill. It's winter in Minnesota, and I just see feet, and I'm white, and I just someone stops, and I see these feet, and I hear Oliver Leiber, and I look up, and it's Maria Dillon, Bob Dylan's
Bob.
daughter, who I had gone to.
Wow.
I had gone to boarding school with. So I
And
was
that's where they're from there, weren't they? Wasn't he from there? Yeah.
In Minnesota.
Yeah.
I had gotten sent out of New York when I was 16 or 17.
Random.
I was getting in trouble, gotten arrested. Dad didn't want to deal with it. They sent me to this school in Vermont on a 85 milking cows and on a working farm. I literally went from like Manhattan, New York, CBGB's, Max's Kansas City, playing clubs, this Studio 54, crazy kind of life in the 70s, like whatever, to like cows.
Wow.
And a field and nothing. It was like shock, right? But it was 100 girls and 100 guys on a hill in Vermont. That was my last 2 years of high school. I knew Maria from then. That was it. And had seen her.
So she was in that school as well.
She was in that school as well.
Wow.
Which is random. It was sort of a mixture.
The whole thing is random.
It's really weird. I mean, and I know how non-linear this whole conversation and interview is, and I just like it's just,
hey man, you do you. This is great as far as I'm concerned.
You know, I always say like my brain and my thoughts, it's like Jackson Pollock's Autumn Rhythm. Like that's it. It's like I'm having to like pull it.
Hey,
it's not linear.
We're having fun. This is great. No need.
Okay, one other thing, and then you're gonna have to like just land the plane. Help me land the plane. But
all right.
The only other guitar player, right, that ended up coming the next year, like musician at this school with 100 guys and 100 girls in the middle of fucking nowhere in Vermont. The next year, second year that I'm there's this kid walking around with a Les Paul down around his like knee, right? And he had it plugged into the Les Paul. He had headphones and apparently early version of, I don't know, like a distorted sound that you could hear. And he's walking through the woods, like in Vermont with this Les Paul, and he's in his own, and it's like, I was like, who's this fucking kid, right? And we ended up playing a ton of music together. We're the only two that really kind of played rock and roll. There was like some bluegrassy kids and some local Vermont kids. Anyway, his name was Reb Beach.
Yeah, from Winger.
And
Whitesnake.
And just the odds, the two of us were.
Yeah, that's very like random.
The only two, yeah. In my, it was a hippie school too. So your diplomas were hand painted by an art student, and it would be like this colored, it was like this watercolor of images of you in the school or something that typified you. So my diploma is me and Reb Beach sitting cross-legged, I think by like a river in Vermont with acoustic guitars.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah.
Met Maria there. So cut to.
So hold on, man. Go back to the day by day. So you're in there, and Maria just comes and says, Oliver Leiber. How?
Right. Like what the fuck? Why?
Yeah.
Soda. Why are you scrubbing the floor of the entryway of the Day by Day cafe? Like just what the fuck?
Yeah.
So like, Maria? Anyway. So I had to explain, life had taken some turns. Yeah. And I was in the halfway house up the road, and this was my job, and maybe a couple of years later, we ended up dating. We'd always been friends.
Maybe is like, are you unsure?
No, I'm pretty sure.
He said maybe we ended up dating.
I don't even know why I said it that way.
You're like trying to be discreet.
Yeah. It's funny because
that was good.
When I go back to Minnesota, and I don't always go to the Day by Day, but I think like 6 months ago, or maybe even less than that, every so often I'm like, I gotta go. It's like the pilgrimage
Yeah.
to through the old neighborhood where it all happened before, and
Yeah.
but I will always I'll take a picture of the menu or the outside and I'll send it to Maria.
Oh, that's nice, man.
Yeah, I
That's
did it
cool.
last
That's
time.
like a little thing you guys have. That's really
Yeah,
cool, man. Very
yeah.
cool.
But yeah, she's very much part of the fabric of my memories in those early days in Minnesota.
That's really cool.
So wait, Maria.
So you're back out there. You were just talking about what happened, and your journey and what you were doing prior to this thing with getting the phone call from Russ.
Yeah. So I'm still so I'm still working these jobs and I'm living in this, and so it was kind of surreal. And he said, "Hey man," he goes, "Your dad handed me this cassette," he said, "and play me this song." He goes, "This fucking thing's a hit." He goes, "I love it." He goes, I'm producing the next Chaka record. And it's like, she had just, it's Chaka Khan,
Right.
And I grew up listening to Rufus for the drumming at first. Cause I think when I was listening to Rufus, it was more like Moon Calhoun. I think it was the drummer. I'm not,
I don't know who drummed on that, but all that stuff was really funky and good.
Ray Parker. And he said, "Why don't you? We'll take your master, whatever you cut with or whatever. We'll use that as the I got something wrong, which is my original demo for that was on a Fostex 4-track.
Okay.
Right. But when I went to make a better demo, I went to a studio to do it. So it was on 24. And that's when I met with Paul. That's why Paul was playing on it. So when I went to make a better demo of this. That's how
It's amazing. If you look back at all the sequence, and this is what I think life is magical. And this is, for me, what allows me to believe in a higher power, because I've seen this shit in my own life, and I'm not that good to be doing all this shit by myself, making shit like that. And when I hear, what are the sequence of events that had to happen for this to occur?
It's crazy. Right?
Pretty powerful. Yeah. It's pretty powerful.
It went from me singing all the parts and playing on this little demo to someone saying, "You and St. Paul should get together. You guys, let's, get in a studio somewhere, just see what happens." What happened from that was that I actually ended up writing his first single with him. That's what he was flying to LA to make the video of, was a song.
Okay.
Because that went so well, a week later, after we wrote that song and recorded it, whatever, I said, "Man, I got this little song that I did in my bedroom. Can you want to do it with me?" And we went back to the same studio that we had done that song that was going to be his single, and we recut my song. That's how he had the cassette when he flew to make the video of our song.
This is phenomenal.
And I had sent that simultaneously to my old man. So now there are these two dialogues going on. There's Russ Titleman, who I admired, Chaka Khan, who was like huge star, saying, I want to cut this. He goes, "And you can co-produce it with me."
Wow.
And at the same time, Virgin Records and Gemma Corfield saying, "Who are you? What have you done? We love this song. Are you a legitimate producer? We want to fly out with Paula and see what your setup is in Minnesota and see if you're literally."
Well, I have to ask my roommates to leave that day.
Well, actually, it's a whole other thing. I literally had to get a studio in Minnesota to allow me to go in the room and have the room for like an hour for this meeting.
Wow.
So that I could put my feet up on the console and kind of invite them in and go, "Yeah, here's where I work." And it was all bullshit.
That's awesome though, man.
Literally
that's amazing. That's so cool.
But it came down to the decision where I was offered to co-produce with Russ Titleman and have it be on the Chaka record, or I was offered to be the producer on this unknown female artist's record. And the advice I got, or the way it was presented to me, was this. If you do the Chaka record with Russ Titleman and it's a hit, and it'll probably be a hit, everyone's going to look at the credits and go, Russ Titleman, Chaka Khan. They're not going to see like co-produced by, right? I mean, it's going to be a second line credit. And it's just 100%. Like, if you produce this song on your own with this unknown artist and it's a hit, everyone's going to go, who did this record? Oliver Leiber. Well, who's that? Well, let's check it out, right? And it could be career changing. And I made this decision based on that. And it felt like after I made the decision and I turned down, the Chaka thing and said yes to the Paula thing, I mean, there were months and months and months where I thought like I just shot myself in the foot and ruined my career. It turned out to be a pretty good decision. Yeah.
It turned out to be a great decision. I have a few questions. How did you have the belief in yourself to have the confidence to make that decision? Because here you are kind of like starting your life literally new, being sober. And, when you have childhood trauma like that, self-belief isn't something that's like very high at all. That's really amazing.
Well, I think there's I can't take credit. I would love to take credit for it. I will take credit for listening to the feedback and going, fuck it, I'm jumping off the cliff. So I did do that. But there was a guy that I had met that had been through the halfway house before me. And he had come from New York and he had been driving a cab in New York. But the story is that he had said he was a lawyer. I'm still not clear whether or not he was ever actually a lawyer in New York, because there's a lot of mystery surrounding him. But he had taken to managing Paul Peterson, who he was the one that put us together. He was the one that said, you two guys need to get in the studio together. So he had this, he was starting to try and manage people in Minnesota. He was sort of working his way into the music scene as a manager. He knew the people at that recording studio. He knew Paul. He put us together and he sort of just recognized, he thought I was talented, and he sort of scooped me up with this group of people that he was starting to manage. He's the one that said to me, Oliver, if you have this record and it's a hit with Chaka, people are going to say Chaka. And if you have this record and it's a hit with Paula, people are going to want to know who made this record.
Who's Oliver Leiber? Yeah.
Yeah. He's the one that made that point. And we later had a big falling out and there's a lot of stuff, but I don't want to even go there.
Sure.
What I am grateful to him for is, and what turned out to be life-changing advice, was saying, if you don't go with the superstar and you bet on yourself and you bet on this unknown artist and you win big. And I don't know what allowed me to, I think there was also a part of me, because the thought just came in as I was saying this, like, I want to do this on my own. My dad never helped me before. I had a lot of stuff around him. The fact that he's trying to help me now, there was a part of it that was like, you know what? Thank you. No, thank you.
Fuck you. Yeah. Right.
There was a fuck you in there.
Right.
I was scared to do it. It was like a defining moment too. It was like, what? Fuck you. I'm doing this on my own. I'm going over here with these totally unknown people and I'm going to take my chances.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool.
But
it's funny when you
a mentor or somebody that was presenting me with it, framing it that way. I didn't arrive at it on my own,
Yeah, but you listened and you took a chance. And you know what? And I remember this because certain things I remember, and Keith Nelson,
Mhm.
at the end of his interview,
Yeah.
I said to him, Keith, any final words of wisdom? And he said, always bet on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what that reminded me of, because you bet on yourself, man. And that's a hard thing to do when you're in a vulnerable position.
Well,
So
and
I
you know,
give
you
you a
hit
lot of
on
credit.
something which is like, you know, there's some people, and I marvel at them, their level of self-confidence, their belief in themselves, like, and usually it's like really mediocre motherfuckers too. It's like
Dude,
somehow,
that is so.
I don't know why, like, because even, you know, like Jeff Beck, right, was the most self-deprecating guy, an insecure guy, and like stage fright, and like, I mean, you know, somewhere inside he knew he was a fucking genius, and he also never lost that like self-deprecating, self-doubting thing, right? It's
Yeah.
never those guys. Like it's the anyway. So
No, it's so fun, dude. What you just said is so hilarious, because you wind up like, man, I wish I was that confident.
it's like that motherfucker had some pen that just like
That-
gave him a completely unfounded, unrealistic sense of his value.
That's exactly what happened. But that's
God,
exactly what happened. Yeah, right.
I never had that. So like I handed in, I remember, so the biggest hit that I wrote for her, which was a number one for like 4 weeks, huge hit, right? It was called Opposites Attract. But I remember literally the mixes came from the studio. We had mixed it, and I did a handwritten note that I like rubber band tied to the mixes, the DAT and the you know, that was an apology to Gemma Corfield. Right? It was a fucking apology. It was like, I am so sorry. I fucking lost the plot here. I zigged when I should have zagged. I don't know where it went out. Like, I'm sorry. Like, so I've never been that guy that sort of like dig me. You know,
here, this will be the best thing you've ever heard.
No, and I mean, and to this day, and it that's in some ways never changed. Where it's like, you know, man, I wake up and it's as if I've like, you know, I think about having to write a song or working with somebody. I feel like I've never written a song before. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how I'm going to get through the writing set, you know, like I always, or a gig or anything. It always feels to me like I never feel like I've arrived, you know, or like I really know what I'm doing. Know. And, you know, that's never left me.
But I think people that have a greater level of self-awareness and maybe who are a little spiritual tend to be like that in general. Yeah. I think when you realize that you're not running the show.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I mean, and you tend to be more like aware of things like, I'm allergic to arrogant people.
Yeah.
Right. And I could sense arrogance pretty quickly. Somebody we talked about earlier. Yeah. For example, and I never understood that, because I'm like, how does that serve you when your wife is sick or when your kids are something, you know? And I just never got that at all.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is you know, the arrogance tends to be, you know, accompanied with narcissism. And when you're narcissistic, you don't ask yourself that question of how does this serve me, you know, with my wife? You're not even asking the question. You know what I mean? The fact that you have that thought, by definition, you're not a narcissist. But these people, it doesn't even enter their, you know.
No, it doesn't. You're 100% right.
Reality at all. So, yeah. So I don't know. All that to say that, I've never felt, I get out of bed feeling like I have to prove something to myself even, you know?
Oh, I totally get that. But that's what makes you a likable human being too. I think so. I mean, those are the people I like. So, so Paula Abdul's.
Any sense? Are we making any sense?
No, this is good.
Points of light. 1,000 points of light.
It is 1,000 points. This is great. You kidding? I wouldn't have it any other way. So Paula Abdul's album Forever Your Girl gets released 88. And at that time, it went on to sell 7 million copies, the most successful debut album of all time. First time an artist had 4 U.S. Billboard Hot 100 #1 singles from a debut album, of which you wrote and solely produced 2 of them by yourself, Opposites Attract and Forever Your Girl. And you also wrote and produced The Way That You Love Me,
which only got to number 2, I think, because funny, this is going to sound funny, because fucking Milli Vanilli's Blame It on the Rain, thank you, Warren, stayed at number 1, I think, for like an insane amount of time. And, you know, you're sitting there at number 2, you still have momentum. People are still buying the record. They're still spinning it. But at a certain point, you know, it drops, and it Blame It on the Rain. Anyway, would have been 3 number 1s. Who's counting?
How dare they?
Yeah, how dare they? Yeah.
So if you're not cool talking about this, it's fine. Let me know. So you unknowingly signed away all your publishing royalties for the Paula Abdul record to Virgin.
Nope.
And
nope.
You did not. Okay,
no,
correct me.
I made a publishing deal, but it was a 50-50 deal. So it was just 50% of my publishing.
Okay. Then let's scratch that question.
Tell me where you were headed, and maybe there's
I had a lot of people on this show, like Mark Farner from Grand Funk. This guy played, I think, Woodstock, and they toured nonstop for like 2 years, and they come in and it's like, hey, well, it's time to re-up your contract, and the record label says, you know, you owe us $2 million.
Right.
And he's like, we've been making $250 a week, sir. How, like, you know, I'm not a math teacher, but how does that add up, you know?
Right.
And, you know, I've heard so many stories of this going on. And, you know, to me, a good deal in business is like a good deal for everybody. When the other person walks away happy and when I walk away. But in the record,
talking about the music business, or the music industry,
I don't know how, like, soul, like, do these people have no souls when they just go in and like, hey, here you go, and it's like, like, there's plenty of money to go around.
Yeah. I mean, look, people did some really funky things to me. People, like lawyers that I had gone to represent me and help me, like, make the publishing deal. In the contract that they wrote for me, built themselves in, the lawyer.
So there's a lawyer you hired, independent lawyer, to help
me make the deal.
That's
built
disgusting.
In 10% of my royalty into perpetuity forever on anything I wrote. Right. This is the guy that was representing me. I only find this out later on, a couple of years later, when I'm looking for, I think the publishing company at some point, a couple of years later, I don't know why we were looking at my contract. They go, you know that your lawyer has himself written in here as getting 10% of all of your songs forever? And I was like, no, I didn't know that. So I had to go to another lawyer to call him and basically say, you know, this is not even legal. This is not even, you know, ethical or whatever. And I ended up getting out. So many things like that happen to me. And there are many people that will take advantage of you if they can. And most of us, you know, we're artists. We just want to, you know, the artists
just want to make music.
Yeah. And we just wanted more girls from the camp to come sing. You know, we're doing it. We're just like music and the girls, and you were not like worrying about. I mean, I think people are more savvy now, but in the early days of music, and you hear these stories with all of the great, you know, black musicians and blues musicians.
Those guys got hammered the worst.
Yeah, but it never really, I mean, it's never really changed. It's just that people have tried to get more savvy, and well, even when lawyers get involved, you can't trust your lawyer. Like as the
No,
case.
that's disgusting. I can't believe that.
So in an attempt to make a good publishing deal, like you said, the person that was making that deal for me actually ended up being the snake in the grass.
Yeah, how disgusting is that, man?
And and with this person that I got that sage advice from, about Paula, or they ended up doing some really, really, really amoral stuff too, So I was not immune. I was not immune to that. I didn't make the deal. I didn't sign all my publishing away, but I found myself in over my head with people that knew how to take advantage of me in an area that I just knew nothing about. Like I knew how to play and write and make records, and I didn't know anything about the business. And because I didn't have that relationship with my dad, I didn't ask his advice. I didn't, just like, so it didn't even matter that I came from a place where there probably would have been resources. I didn't have it at that point in my life. I was told that we didn't talk for 5-6 years. So I was kind of an ignorant guy on my own, like, getting taken advantage of in the business as well.
But you think people dealing with you would be like, hey, let's, who your dad was. Like, it's probably not a good idea to screw.
You would think.
I mean,
yeah. Though, when I look back and I look at where I was in my life and and even the way I am now, which is pretty much an open book, and I won't edit out much, I mean, I don't want to say inappropriate stuff, but I think when I went to these people at that point in my life, like the lawyer or whatever, I think I was like, hey man, so I don't talk to my dad. We don't have a relationship. Because I think the questions might have been like, well, can't your dad help you with this? Or why don't you? And I'm like, no, man, it's not like that. Like, we don't speak. We don't have a relationship. I'm on my own. I think I would have given, so
you being honest, people took advantage of that, basically.
Yeah.
They saw a gap, and they just leveraged that. That's messed up, man.
And I wasn't even thinking that way. I wasn't even thinking because also when you sober up, newly sober, and you learn this program of honesty, and you're just like open book. So I think I was an open book, and probably in areas and with people that wasn't safe. That wasn't safe.
But it's a shame, anyway.
Yeah.
So how did that record change your life, both, career-wise, financially, opportunity-wise?
Yeah.
How did Forever Your Girl change your life?
Enormous. It was like, seismic shift. I went from, so then, I went from living in that house with the 5 other sober guys to buying a house out in the suburbs near Prince. He was building Paisley Park, and I wanted to be, I don't know, in my mind, it was sort of like, look, everything musically revolved around Prince then. And
out there, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was like, well, where does Prince live? I want to live near there. I bought this house, and, Virgin made a publishing deal with me, that deal, which blew my mind, at the time. And I really thought, this is before the record sold all those copies. And when I was turning my mixes in with apology notes,
so funny.
Let me take you, Gemma Corfield, like, let me take you up the street to Virgin Music. Because do you have a publishing deal? And I was like, no, what's that? Come with me, right? So before that record came out, she took me to Virgin Music and they made me an offer. And the offer was 50-50 publishing. And what at the time was, I mean, I don't know what look, I had been working odd jobs. I had been playing
scrubbing the floor in the day-to-day. Good Lord.
My gigs were like bowling alleys, the Burnsville Bowl, like, bars. And they said, we will give you an advance. And I was like, oh, great. Well, like, how much? And it was like $350,000.
And your mind is like,
well, first of all, I felt like, again, I almost felt like saying, you guys, look, I don't want to sucker punch you guys or anything, but like, you're so like going to lose money here. Like, you don't even know what you're doing. I was convinced that they didn't know what they were doing. And I felt badly. I felt like I was getting over on them. But that was the deal that I made.
Yeah.
So I got $350,000 up front. So this is how it changed my life. I bought a house. I moved out of the house where I had been for several years with these guys. I bought this little house in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, next to Chanhassen, which is where Paisley Park was. I bought a 24-track reel-to-reel Sony MCI. I bought a recording console from Jesse Johnson from the time, who I had worked for. I had been in a band for him, but I bought his recording console, not straight from him, from the place where he was having them, sell it for him. And I sort of put together a little studio in my living room there. And so now I had the means to record, and my phone started ringing, and it started ringing from every major record label saying, we have this artist. Do you want to write and produce for so-and-so? Do you want to write and produce for so-and-so? And I think that year when Billboard, they come out with all the charts and things like that, they had the top 10 producers in the country. And so the year or the year after that record came out, I was listed as number 7 record producer in the country. So
congrats. That's awesome.
Well, long time ago, but I went from, again, right, playing locally, scrubbing floors, like just, being a local musician to being a recognized record producer, and songwriter, nationally and internationally. So all of a sudden I'm getting calls to work and to produce records. And that sort of started that whole career for me.
Well, and equally monumental, it needs to be said. You got $350,000 newly sober, and you didn't go back to using that. So, I mean, to me,
in my 20s,
right? That's the fucking crowning accomplishment of all of this.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, man. Because it's like an interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, but it occurred to me. It occurred to me, and I remember saying it at the time, sort of sitting in that new house, and I still went to meetings and had sober friends, thinking. Right. Oh my God, can you imagine if I had this kind of money when I was putting needles in my arm?
Yeah.
I'd have lasted 2 days. 2 days. Like, right. And I couldn't believe it. And I had this sense of, man, everything happens for a reason and in its time, because this would have been a death sentence to me, if I had received this kind of money before I was sober. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Honestly, that's like really like pat on the back. That's amazing, man. In your 20s. That's
well, like, that was probably late 20s, right? Late 20s.
It's pretty phenomenal. I mean, look, I don't need to tell you the rates of sobriety are pretty low to begin with, unfortunately, but you add $350,000 to the mix, it's probably like zero. I mean, honestly, that's
There were a lot
Really?
of tests along the way. I mean, I'll tell you, we can jump back. I mean, sometimes I don't know how it is that like I've been able to stay sober and all these other people, I mean, all along the way haven't. And people that in some ways were more like went to more meetings than me and they could quote the big book chapter and verse and they were more, I don't know, they seemed like they actually had direct, phone line to God and all this stuff that I never felt. But when I look back at what my path was, it's like, something that connected to this. I remember when I got on that plane, when I had the Paul Masson, what I had been doing the few weeks before that was I was playing drums in a band that I put together. I was an MD.
Mm-hmm.
I dropped out of college for that semester because I couldn't hang with college work. And I put together a band for one of the Village People.
Okay.
Yes. Construction worker, David Hoda. Through an old high school friend that was singing backgrounds with him. I got a call and can you put a band together? And so like I put this band together. I was the MD, and just before I like hit bottom and got on a plane to go to Minnesota, we went to a studio because there were auditions for this show at the time called Star Search.
Okay.
Which was like the American Idol of the time, right?
Sure. Ed
and they'd come
McMahon.
to town, and I guess they had cattle calls where, they'd be set up with cameras, and one after another, your band would come in and play for them, and they'd record you, and then some executive somewhere in LA would go, okay, let's try that band and that band, right? And you had to go in the studio and make an actual recording because none of it was live on TV. So we went in, we recorded 4 songs in the studio. And this is me at the height of my, I still have the recording, by the way. I have the cassette. But 4 songs, and then do a faking playing the song on camera, and then you wait to hear, I don't know if you got in or you didn't get it, right? So I forget about all of that. I go to 28 days of treatment. They're like, dude, you need to go to a halfway house. I'm like, fine, go to a halfway house. I'm doing all this work and with counselors who are also saying, the only way you're going to stay sober is if you're willing to put your sobriety above everything else. That means, like, are you willing to give up music if that means you can't stay sober, And I went through some really heavy times of, bawling my eyes out, grieving, like it may mean that I can't live my dream of being this, rock star, session musician, like I may not be able to do it and stay alive. And I really did hit a point where at least I said the words, yeah, I'm willing to give it all up to stay sober. I don't know if I was 100% at that time, but like there was that having to come face to face with it. Like I had to ask those questions. A month or 2 or 3 into, no, I'll tell you exactly what it was. I went in July, August, September, October, November, December. So now it's snowy and it's winter in St. Paul. I'd been there 5 months. It's the dead of winter. I get a phone call from my brother, who I had put in the band. That's why he was playing keys in the band.
And this is in the David Hodo band.
David Hodo band.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So right. I had picked a couple guys, a buddy of mine, George Weiss from college, to play bass. Put my brother on keys. I was playing drums. Through some recommendation, some guy, a sax player named Steve Elson, I heard about. I was like, yeah, I'm in. He was unheard of. He ended up playing for, if you look him up, for David Bowie. He's like the sax player on the iconic
Young Americans.
Yeah, no, later. It'd be more the Nile Rodgers era of Bowie with Stevie Ray and that era, that record. But anyway, he was a sax player, and and a guitar player whose name I can't remember. And he said, dude, we're on Star Search. We're like flying to LA in a week. You got to be there. I'm like, fuck. Okay. Well, let me go talk to them. I'll sort it out and I'll let you know, so I hang the phone and I meet with my counselor. I'm like, I'm on Star Search. So I need to go to LA and then I'll come back right after, And he's like, it doesn't work that way. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, if you go, you can't come back,
Wow.
Now I'm realizing as I'm saying, it's like, of course I could come back, but it wasn't presented to me like that. And in some ways, maybe they could refuse me, but he was like, you need to make a decision. What's the most important thing in your life? Is it your sobriety or is it other stuff? Is it your career? And I was like, okay.
Wow. How did you have?
So
what was? Go ahead. Sorry, I got to ask you follow up. Go ahead.
I end up watching on this black and white TV, okay, in the common room of the halfway house in the dead of winter in St. Paul, literally, again, through the window, the Schmidt's brewery, like blown out neon, like half working sign going. These people it wasn't a handsome lot. It wasn't a handsome. And it was like watching this band that I had put together, and they used the recordings that I had done. I was playing drums on it, but they had like Rex Smith, drummer, random dude with great hair, like playing my part, watching Star Search, crying my eyes out, like,
wow.
And everybody kind of knew the story. So they all, the guys I was in groups with there are watching with me, and I'm fucking crying my eyes out going, that was my chance.
Yeah.
That was my break. And I fucking blew it. And here I am in this shithole, halfway house in God fucking knows where, Minnesota. And my life is fucking over. I literally hit that. My point being, because you had said something about the money, and there are these moments in my life where I made these decisions that came from what felt like it's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted to do. It felt like it came from a deeper place. It came from some kind of knowing. And at the end of the day, if nothing else, it came from the part of me that wanted to fucking live. And I made some of these decisions. And what I realized is these decisions, making them, and then life later on giving me something like the success with Paula.
Almost like karma.
It's sort of like, oh, wow. I thought I had hit my bottom but look what happened after. And I didn't have the 33,000 foot view. And look what happened after that. And I thought that was the end of my, and what am I trying to say? What I think I did is I made some really hard decisions that put sobriety in front of everything. And as painful as they were, I think they set a precedent for me in my life about just a commitment to wanting to live and knowing that if I put drugs in me again, if I go down, you know what? I don't know what will happen. You know what? I can't tell you. But if it's what people have, said to me and, things that I've like observed, you don't get to go back, you stay sober 10, 20, 30 years and you use again. It's not like it hits reset and you get to go back to the beginning. It's like you get right back on where you jumped off the train, and where I jumped off the train was a dark, scary, dangerous place. And I don't know. I scared myself enough that I didn't want to risk it. And I guess what was my point? I guess, I don't know. I made some tough decisions along the way that weren't the easy decisions. They weren't the easy decisions that I don't know that everybody would have made. And I don't think that I'm special because of it. And I don't entirely understand how or why I made those decisions. I believe it came from some place deep in me, or that's not even me, that was just like, choose life. Choose life. You don't even need to understand why you're doing this. Yeah, this feels like shit. And, but choose it anyway. Choose it anyway.
Dude, honestly, man, so, I'm of course so happy for you, but that's such that speaks volumes to your commitment to yourself and to your discipline. I mean, that's almost unheard of. I don't need to tell you that. You're in the music business. You heard hundreds of guys with stories that didn't make that decision already. So, honestly, man, that's really fucking hats off to you, man.
Thanks. I think I scared myself. Without going into detail, like what it looked like at the end, I scared myself. I knew I didn't have a lot. I couldn't keep going that way very much. It wasn't. So,
let's talk. Thank you for sharing all that, by the way. I appreciate it. It was really kind of you. I want to talk about some of the artists you work with. Tell me how you got the gig, and like maybe a cool or interesting story. You toured with Rod Stewart. How did you get the gig? Interesting story. And also talk about playing the solo to Maggie May on J Leno, because I can't imagine. I cannot imagine how good you felt doing that. I mean, that's unimaginable.
Yeah, no, that's one of those moments, we have sort of, I don't know, it's a bucket list, because it wasn't on my bucket list specifically, but there are those moments where you kind of go, oh, dude, take a mental snapshot right now. Like, take a minute, like, be here now. This is fucking happening, right?
Yeah.
That was one of those. But so when I moved to LA, I was playing some gigs with Jeff Lorber.
The keyboard player.
Yeah. And we had met
great
in
keyboard
the process of doing motherfucker keyboard player. And again, somebody that I had listened to as a young, in my teens and 20s, because of the drummer. Dennis Bradford was a bad man. And that was a Jeff Lorber Fusion was a 3-piece. And it was just Jeff on keys, bass and drums. And his rhythm section was treacherous. And I loved his playing. So I listened to Jeff Lorber Fusion records. And when I came to LA working on the Paula record, I needed to overdub a few things. And Gemma Corfield at Virgin said, oh, well, Jeff Lorber does a bunch of overdubs. I was like, Jeff Lorber? The Jeff Lorber? He goes, yeah, he plays overdubs. So I went up to Jeff Lorber's studio. And it's so funny, man, because he texted me. He texted me last night. I was watching the Laker game. He says, what's happening?
That's so
funny.
Weird. That's really random.
But we met. He did some overdubs on the Paula stuff for me. And he was another one. Like, he was an idol for me. He was like, I mean, Jeff Lorber, those records were, Toad's Place and Tune 88, all that shit. That was untouchable stuff for me as a drummer. Like, that was like, and he loved Minneapolis stuff. He loved the Prince stuff. He loved what I had done. And, I play this Minneapolis style rhythm guitar, which is a thing, and I learned it from Prince, and I learned it from Jesse Johnson, and I learned it from being there 8 years. It's like, it's a thing. And I just happened to do it pretty well. And he loved that. He's like, man, will you play on this? So I started to play on things. He'd be making records like Dave Cause and some of the things you read off. A lot of these more jazzy, fusion-y things that you wouldn't expect to see my name on. It was Lorber going, man, will you come and play? He just wanted me to scratch Minneapolis style,
That's cool.
And so we had a relationship. And they said, man, you want to come? Will you play live with me? Right? So I did some small tours just playing live with him because it was fun. It was just, it was one of those
like
things.
With his trio.
Yeah. It's like, I can't believe I'm playing. It was different players at the time.
Sure.
It gave me the itch to be playing live again. And what I ended up doing was it was early night, it was 90, and I was missing. I was here. It was maybe 92 now. I've been here a couple of years. I've been here. I missed Minneapolis funk and Minneapolis music. I missed everything I had been around, in Minnesota. And I thought, fuck it. I want to put just a band together that can play that stuff and just play somewhere in town. And so I knew some of the musicians. It was like killer drummer Sergio Gonzalez that I had played with Leiber, that played with Leiber. I was like, okay, he's playing drums. Oh yeah, Nate Phillips. Also, I met who was from the band called Pleasure, who played like iconic track. I forget what it's called. That for anyone that was like slapping bass or whatever. Like one of the tracks that Nate played on is like iconic, right? Like you had to learn that. I forget the group, but it's a great rhythm section. And I just started to put this band together. Other guitar player I had met in a music store here in town was Randy Jacobs, who's killer guitar player, grew up in Detroit, plays with his thumbs. Another guy, no pick, thumb guy, was in Was Not Was. He was the guitar player.
Okay.
Was Not Was. Now for the last 20 years, I mean, he's like first call smooth jazz out there playing with everybody. But killer R&B, blues, rhythm guitar player. And we just clicked. We were in there, I don't know. I was trying a guitar and he was trying a guitar. I think I'm probably playing like a Chaka Khan, like Ray Parker's You Got the Love or something like that. And he started playing, and he plays, it's real glove style and it's muted, and mine's real attacky with a pick, and everything just slotted. We kind of looked at each other. I'm like, you want to do some gigs? I don't know. So he was the other guitar, but so I just put this band together. And I think I asked Leiber if he would come sit in a bunch, which he did. And I picked material that I loved. And it was all 70s funk. It was all over the map, actually. It was just everything I loved. A lot of 70s funk, some Minneapolis funk, some Motown stuff, right? And there was a club in town called The Mint, and I called the band Hollywood Swingin'. And
that's awesome. Hollywood Swinging. That's very cool.
Swinging, and of course we had to play Cool and the Gang shit. Horn players started to show up. Singers started to show up. I met so many people, and everyone would sit in. I mean, like Joe Walsh. It was like all these people would sit in, and it started to get a reputation as a fucking ass wiping band, and a great sit-in. People come sit in, and so it became this thing. Monday nights at the Mint, which is this famous old dive in LA, became lines outside the fucking door, the small club, and it was just a thing. So what
for
started
Hollywood,
out,
this is all for Hollywood Swinging.
Yeah. And so I ended up meeting so many people. And you had mentioned, like we had talked a little earlier, but what a lot of people came through that later on for years. People would go, man, I used to come see you at the Mint. It's like, guys who I knew as players that I didn't even know were there, but so you asked me how I got the Rod gig. I get a phone call one day from a guy named Carmine Rojas.
Man, I had him on here. Lovely.
Okay.
Love, fucking salt of the earth.
Love Carmine.
Yeah.
And he said, hey man, he goes, he was one of these guys I met because he would come and want to sit in. I knew, wasn't even sure. I don't know if I knew if he was who he was playing with or whatever. I think someone said, I used to play with Bowie or whatever. And He loved, I knew the songs he liked to sit in on, whatever. And he was one of these guys. It's like he'd show up every week. I'm like, come on up, and Carmine would come, and I don't know what the tunes, he would do some of the Motown stuff. He was a great player, but it was like that. So he called me up. He said, man, he goes, will you make a list for me? Because Rod's auditioning guitar players, and And I know you know all the cats in town because they all come and sit in on Monday nights. Can you make a list for me of guitar players that would be a good audition for Rod? I'm like, sure. So I make a list, whatever, and I give them the numbers and whatever, right? It's like, go for it. This guy's great. This guy's great. This guy's great. And he goes, thank you. And he calls me back like a week later. He goes, I got another favor for you to ask of you. So what? He goes, will you come and be the guitar player that knows all the parts so that when we're auditioning somebody and then Rod goes, okay, now you play the lead and you play the rhythm, right? That I know, because I know you can cover all this shit because I've watched you cover all this shit, Monday nights. Like, I'm like, sure, that sounds like fun. So I'm not auditioning for Rod. I'm like the auditioning guitar player.
You're the house band.
I'm the house band playing with Carmine and Dave Palmer, the drummer, so that we can find they can find a guitar player.
Now this was was this after Jim Cregan played for Rod?
Yeah, that was after Jim Cregan played for Rod. In fact, it was Jeff Golub was still playing, but the other guitar player had just left or something, and they were trying to fill his shoes. Can't remember. And so what ended up happening is he never told Rod that who I was or what I was doing. He probably didn't want to say, this is the guy that recommended all the guitar. It was like he didn't tell Rod. So Rod thought I was just another guy auditioning. So like the first day, I remember there was like 30 people. And then the next day there was like 15. And the next day there was like 7. And it was like, I was just the guy playing with and I kept coming back. And it got to a point where one day there was like 3 guys and I get a call from Carmine he goes, I got a question for you. He goes, you ready to go on tour? I went, what do you mean? He goes, I mean, Rod's got you on his short list. Like, there's 3 of you left. I'm like, what are you talking about? Doesn't he? He's like, no, he didn't, it's like you, Jimmy Crespo.
Yeah, from Arrows. Yeah,
right? Yeah. Killer guitar player. And one other dude. I can't remember who it was. I'm like, are you serious? He goes, I just need to know because I need to know how to present it to him. But like, if he, are you I'm like, and at that point I had so much going on. I was producing the Cores. I was producing Beth Hart. It was like 1997, 98. It made no sense on any level, business-wise, career-wise. But like the 11-year-old kid in me.
Yeah. Who the hell doesn't want to go on tour with Rod Stewart?
Like, oh, I might play Madison Square Garden. That's where I saw Sly, Zeppelin, Stones, like that was it as a New York kid. I'm like, fuck yeah. Right. Now it's the only day I'm nervous when I show up because now there was like pressure was off me all the time. I was so relaxed and loose. It was like, yeah, I don't need to be good. I just need to be okay.
Yeah.
The last day they call me in and it's like the 3 of us. And now I'm like, I'm nervous.
Of course.
The guy who got the gig was the guy who should have gotten the gig. And I knew it. And it was like Jimmy Crespo, right?
Right.
So he got the gig. Fine. The guy was like, just amazing. And that was
right.
He does the tour. Some point after the tour, that tour, whatever, it's a year later or something, I don't know, I get a call from Carmine going, Jeff Golub can't make it in and we got to play the Tonight Show in 2 days or 3 days. Or you know what? It could be 5 days. It was a short amount of time. Can you learn Rod's new single, which was written and produced by Terry and Jimmy, Minneapolis, right?
Right.
I think he figured also stylistically it was more R&B, had nothing to do with classic rock Rod. I think he knew I could cover that.
No problem.
the couple other classic Rod songs. Can you get this together in the next? I'm like, sure, why not? So I learn it. I do the show, and yeah. So the moment was, we play the single, right? And you always play 2 songs, I think, with Tonight Show. It's like, or if you're Rod or Big Act, you play one and then you play we played that. And after we played that, towards the end of the song, they're like, bring Rod Stewart back on again. And it's Maggie May. And I just remember getting to the solo. And, I had never performed live with him. I had done, the what is it? Auditions.
The studio thing. Yeah.
Studio and low key. And, and then it just went back to national television, Maggie May. And there was this moment where, I had pretended to be sick in 6th grade, 1971. 10 years old.
Dude, you have a good memory.
Well, because I know how old I was. I remember the year that record came out, 6th grade. I remember it. And I pretended to be sick, and I stayed in my room with little Victrola record player, learning the solo to Maggie May. And one of the reasons why I learned it and why I thought I could is because there was something. It was still in that box, that pentatonic box. Blue.
Yes. It's a great solo.
It was accessible.
Who played the original solo? Was that
Ronnie?
Was that
Ronnie
okay?
Wood.
I was gonna. Yeah.
And he played the bass on it, and he played like that was a lot of Ronnie Wood on that.
Yeah.
It's like when Ronnie was you know, on another level, and I stayed home learning the solo as best I could at that time to Maggie May. I think I got through the first 4 bars, but I got the blue do right. And I'm on national TV, and Rod comes over. It's the solo, and he does the classic arm around my shoulder, and I'm playing the solo. And I have this moment where, you can dissociate, like you kind of leave your body and you're looking at yourself, and there's a voice going, Oliver, fucking get back in your body or you're going to stop being able to play what you're doing. But I had that
Oliver,
moment
fucking get back in your body.
Holy shit. I'm on stage thinking, do you remember when you were 10 and you stayed home, pretended to be sick, and learned this on your, I didn't have an electric guitar, on your acoustic guitar, and here you are, and fuck me.
That had to feel amazing.
That was amazing. And I just did that again. Carmine, thank you, Carmine, right? And it was just to cover that night. And I get a call the next day saying, Rod loves you, man, and he wants to know if you want to join his band. And I was like, oh yeah, why not? Soon after that, Rod learns, and then at that point, I think maybe Carmine said a little bit more about me, because I honestly, through the whole auditioning period a year before, I was just another guitar player. And even when I came and did the show, I was that guitar player. You might remember him from almost getting the gig a year ago, whatever.
Right.
But I think after he decided he wanted me in the band, I think Carmine might have said something like, he's a producer, well, more about, his old man was, and Rod started to take a more of an interest, and he wanted to see, he knew I had a studio. He wanted to see my studio, which I built up at the house, which is now Joe V's.
Studio okay. Interesting. Okay. I didn't realize that.
Which
okay.
Keith Nelson bought from me, but I built the studio there. And that's where we made his next record. Was
such an amazing story, man.
With the Maggie May 12-string that Ronnie played on the original record under my bed for the whole year. Rod was like, yeah, keep it, take it, play it, So
that's fucking amazing.
I would sometimes at night just take that guitar, and just play it, play the opening, riff to it. Just like, fuck, that's the sound. That's the guitar. That's amazing. How it all happened. It really happened because I was in a glorified funk cover band that I put together.
Hollywood Swinging.
And it kind of became a thing. And Carmine, who was one of the guys that would sit in all the time, thought I'd be a good guy to help out for the auditions.
That's awesome, man. I'm so
Yeah.
glad to hear that. Carmine, I really enjoyed. He's a
And
very sweet.
killer musical
Yeah.
bass player, king of the substitutions. Like you could be playing the most known, simple, like just done chord progression that we've all done, and he will start substituting. He just has a bass notes that turn it into a complex chord that are so just like, I don't know. He does it effortlessly. He's really musical. Great
Yeah.
player and
Great
a
player,
better
great guy.
human being. Yeah.
Yeah, really good human being. Brooklyn guy. The
Yeah.
Brooklyn guy.
Yeah. Puerto Rican, New Yorican.
That's right. That's right. He had a good story.
Yeah.
Tell me about 1982. So Prisoners of Rock. And when I saw Dennis Elsis, I was like, holy shit, I haven't heard that name because I grew up listening to NEW and PLJ, right? And it said, first time you're on the radio, Jason Flom. And I got to tell you, I've never met Jason. I'd love to, but I have heard nothing but I've heard 20 guests on the show who've had nothing but incredible praise to say about this guy, that in a world of corporate assholes, he is not one of them, so I was eager to hear all of this.
Okay. Here's the story. First of all, I went to elementary school with Jason Flom. Right?
That's crazy.
And
where was that, in the Village or?
No, that was before I moved to the Village. It was called Ethical Culture, the school, and it was on 64th Street in Central Park West.
Oh my God.
We've known each other since I was a lifer. I went in like kindergarten, but I think he came in like 3rd, 4th grade. I don't know. And I remember him back from when, and he didn't take a guitar. I mean, I'd been playing since I was there. He wasn't a musician at the beginning, but somewhere at like 14 or 15, he started to play guitar. I remember he had a card made up that said Jason Flom, ass kicking guitarist. I still remind him to
classic
every day. But Jason, well, there's some, I don't know how deep to go into this. Jason got a job actually setting up window displays for like Sam Goody or like records, or like for, he got a job at Atlantic in the mailroom, then setting up displays like in record stores for Atlantic, whatever. And he worked his way up to, to who he is, and to, the incredibly successful executive that he is. Back in 1982, so he had connections, right? I mean, he was working in the record, and somehow he had a record connection with, a connection with Dennis Elsis or that radio station, maybe through Atlantic at that point. I think he wasn't an executive, but he was working there. And he said, let's write, let's do an original song and let's record it, and I'll submit it for this thing called Prisoners of Rock, which was this thing that Dennis Elsis did back in the day, which is they would pick once a week, I think, one unsigned New York band to air, right?
That's
so we
pretty
did
cool.
This recording. I played drums on it. It was called War Jam. And really it was an excuse for me, like, it started with a very hyped up, faster version of 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which is because I was
the standard. That's a Gadd. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Gadd thing. But, it started with that, right? And it got really rocked out. But that's why it became called War Jam, because it was very military. It had that like sort of, but it was protesty. But that's how it started. So it started with me sort of doing this hyped up Steve Gadd sort of military drum thing, and then it went into this big rock jam and whatever. Somehow he managed to like submit it to the radio station, and he calls me one day and he's like, dude, we're going to be on the radio like tomorrow at 7 p.m., whatever. And I have somewhere else, there's a boombox recording somewhere of it, like, Dennis
of you on NEW. That's so crazy, man.
Yeah. So I think I was at 1982, first year of college. So I was a freshman at college, and I remember that was the first time I was like nervous, shaking, boombox waiting to hear myself play. It was the first time I ever heard myself on the radio. That was number one. That was with Jason. I have so many other tie-ins with Jason, but I don't know how far a wormhole we want to go down.
Yeah, we got a lot of other stuff to cover about you.
Yeah.
So. That's a cool story though, man. That wasn't that pretty, hearing PLJ and NEW at that time was pretty revolutionary. It was like, to hear all those deep tracks suddenly being played on the radio, it was like, wow, this was mind blowing. I remember that.
Yeah. That's when radio was,
was radio. It was awesome. Radio. That's when it made a difference in like artists' lives and in music business.
Yep.
The Cores, how did you get with them? And did you happen to bump into a guitar player that played with him called Anto Drennan? Any chance?
Yeah. So perfect segue. The answer to that is I'm so bad with short answers. Here's the connection. Ready?
You're great. This is good.
Jason Flom calls me when I'm in Minnesota still, living in that little house with, the 5 other guys with my Fostex tape machine. And he tells me this story about meeting a singer in Utah when he was on vacation that was kind of a lounge act singer. And sort of, he said I kind of handed her my business card and said, come to New York ever and I'll get you a record. Whatever. He sort of, he did that thing. And he called me up and he goes, she showed up. She's in New York, dude. She's here. What the fuck? He said, he said, can you write me something? He knew I was in Minnesota. He literally asked me, could I come up with something? Because he said, we're putting out 12-inch dance records and I could just do one dance record and I'll be we'll be good. Can you write something? I wrote It's Just the Way That You Love Me, the song that Chaka wanted and the song that ultimately opened the door. I wrote that for Jason, for this artist that had showed up at his door and he needed, and that's why I wrote the song. There's another layer to that song, which is I had to say, Jason, you're going to hate me and I will make this up for you one day. Cause he heard it and he was like, great. And she's the one that sang the demo. When I went to make a better demo of it, okay, it's all coming together. Okay.
Oh, wow.
I did a 4-track demo. I sent it to Jason, just me doing the parts. He's like, great. When can I send her out there to do the right? And so I got to make a recording of it. I got to put it together. That's why I went to make a better version. That's when I called up Paul Peterson saying, hey, I got to do this other song. Can we use the same studio we just recorded in for your thing? And we'll knock it together we'll do it together. We knocked the track out together. That's why he was playing on it. She flies out. I record her vocals. I do a rough mix. No money has exchanged hands at this point. I send the song to my old man just because I was proud of it, thinking it was going to come out as a 12-inch single one-off for Jason Flom, right?
Right.
Paul inadvertently, without telling me, takes the recording and flies to LA with it, where it ends up being played for Paul. But it was really, now I'm just sort of remembering this shit now, made because I was good. Jason asked me, would I do something? Nobody ever asked me to write a song. I was like, fuck
wow.
Yeah. I had to call him up and I had to say, dude, don't hate me. Please don't hate me. But this song that I wrote, I've been offered a chance to do, right? I said, I swear to God, I will make this up to you one day, right? I can't remember the exact, but he was cool. I mean, there was never a lawsuit. There was never nothing. It was like, okay. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't happy about it, but he was like, all right, dude. So
you didn't even write it. You wrote it in response to his request.
Yeah.
This gets more and more the outside events that it just boggles my mind.
I'm not the guy that wakes up ever and never been saying, "Ooh, I must create. I must write a song. This thing has to come out of me. If it doesn't, I won't be able to sleep." I mean, sometimes I'm exaggerating, but for me, it's always, started with more of like someone said, "Hey, can you do something that this or this?" Or we're, it's like, I kind of need to know that it's going somewhere. And maybe it goes back to that early need for validation. Like somebody wants this. And when I do it, and if I do a good enough job, there's going to be some feedback, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, could just be the way you create too, because I've never had this conversation, but I think that's got to be different for different people.
Totally. I mean, there is a quote that I think my dad told me that, someone asked Sammy Kahn or George M. Cohen, one of the biggest, like early songwriters, how does a song start? And he said, it starts with a phone call. Like,
wow.
That's how I write. It's like, if we need you to write something that sounds like Yankee Doodle, and he writes Yankee Doodle. Like, so that was kind of more. So Jason, so he realizes that this song goes to Paula Abdul. Jason does. He sees it become the record that it is. And sometime in the wake of that, X amount of years later, he starts saying, will you do that? So he came to me asking me to do Beth Hart. I made that record for him.
She talked very highly about him.
Yeah. And the record I did for her, the single, probably her only top 10 single that she's ever had. And that was the first thing I did for him after.
So you made up for it.
So I made up for it. And then he asked me to do, would I meet with the Chorus? And I said, of course. And again, like Jason was somebody that I would never, ever, and based on just our childhood, but also based on who he is and how he responded to that situation. It's like, I will say yes.
Absolutely. Always. Yeah, of course. I totally get that.
He was and the truth is like he was championing me too.
Yeah.
Like, thank you, Jason.
Yeah, of course.
We all need a champion. And, he was asking. So I get a call from him, and it was something like, I'd never heard of the Chorus. And I was there was a lot going on that year. So I don't know. There was Rod, there was Beth, some other records I was making in the Chorus. So I don't know where I was at, but I met with them, and ended up handing them a track that I had done, just a track with another childhood friend of mine, John Shanks.
I had him on the show here a long time ago.
So we grew up in the same building.
Did you?
Yeah.
If I remember him, wasn't his dad like the EVP of Merv Griffin's show or something like that?
Yeah, and Merv lived in the building.
That's really
so
crazy.
We grew up in the building in between the San Remo and the Dakota, which are two iconic New York buildings.
Yeah.
They're in every shot of New York, every skyline shot ever of New York, from Central Park or whatever. You see these three buildings, and it was like the Dakota, the building I grew up in until when I was 10, and the San Remo. So John and I knew each other from 0 to 10 in that building. Merv Griffin lived in that building. Later on, Jagger moved into that building. It has a whole history. I think Jimmy Crespo different. Maybe Crespo even moved into that building for a short period when he was like recording for Aerosmith. But okay, help me land the plane.
John Shanks, you had hooked up with John Shanks for this Jason thing.
Then he moved to LA, and through a bunch of different circumstances, we were reconnected later in life around sobriety. Won't go too much into that story, but at that time, I was calling him in on everything I was working on to co-write. Great guitar player, talented writer, and childhood friend,
Sure.
like Flom.
What more
Yeah,
credentials do you need? Yeah,
you know.
right.
So we were. So we would do tracks sometimes. We would just fucking do tracks. I had the studio and we'd be like, I don't know, let's do it, right? So we had this track and anyway, ended up handing it to the core sisters, not the lead singer, Andrea, but the two sisters that were also in the group. And thinking like, we had tried to write with them all day long and we were doing sort of what we thought what they wanted, which was more like sort of, I don't know, lots of 6/8 sort of, things that we thought were Irish sounding. I don't fucking know what we were doing, but it wasn't really what they were looking for. And at the end of this day of just nothing really going anywhere, I don't know who brought up, but we ended up saying, well, we got this track, right? And we played them this track and they were like, fuck, that's great. Can we take that track? And they ended up giving it to their younger sister, Andrea, who really at that point was really writing most of the lyrics and the top line stuff. And a few days later, I get a call saying that, Andrea wants to come to the studio and sing the song to us and see what we thought. So she had written lyrics to that track. And that's how that started, and I ended up doing about half that record.
Producing and writing.
Yeah, and writing.
That's really cool.
And that was another one for Jason. And that's another one where it wasn't big I just did an interview because it's like the 25th or 30th anniversary of that record. But the guy who did the interview told me that it was the largest selling record of that decade in Europe.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, it sold Paula ended up selling 30 million worldwide. And this one ended up doing about 30 million worldwide, which is crazy.
So you don't fuck around.
Well, I do fuck around a lot, and that's all of stuff you will never hear, I've never heard of.
That's the B-roll that's on the tape cut on the floor.
Dude, the stuff that makes it through in my case has been just like...
It's everybody. It's not just you. It's everybody. I had a couple of songwriters on here one time that were saying like, like 1 out of every 20 or 30 or 50 songs that they write, they'll even consider putting it on a record. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, like my best stuff, the songs that I think, just have never even been recorded, Yeah. I generally won't tell people about I have a weird, because they're so kind of poppy in some ways and just the genre, I will not talk about the Paula stuff a lot of the time. It's not like, I don't know, what am I trying to say?
Yeah, what are you trying to say?
It was stuff I wrote as a kid at a certain period of time, It
doesn't take away from the the quality of it.
Yeah.
I know what you mean though, because when you're at I really know what you mean, because I have things that I'm not proud of, not because they were probably bad, but because I'm uncomfortable with who I was at that particular point in time in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm probably a far worse critic about those items than anybody else might be. But if you don't like who you are at a time and you're not comfortable, or it's hard to and especially if you've changed and you've worked hard at changing.
Yeah.
It's you almost disassociate anything that happened out of that couldn't be good because I was an asshole then or whatever.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand that. If that's what you're talking about.
I've never said this. And again, never said this, but here's the truth. Those could have been harder records, particularly The Way That You Love Me and Opposites could have been harder records if they were done by an artist that was harder. Their intent and the way they were written and the way they sounded to me when you know what I mean, were just, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I guess I wanted to have been making harder records than those.
Right.
And so not to take away from them. I think I get a little comfortable. Here's the insight.
But you do realize you could say that about any song that's ever been a hit in any genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you gave The Killing of Georgie by Rod Stewart to Metallica.
Yeah, they so yeah,
or to Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, it would have been a different record. And a good record's a good record.
I've been embarrassed by how poppy they were. And it's funny because I love pop. I love pop records. I fucking think Sugar Sugar is one of the greatest records.
That's so funny.
Of all time,
Honey.
And so, I mean, it's just weird. I have this kind of weird bifurcation, which is like, I love deep funk and blues and R&B, right?
Right.
At the same time, I love, and I guess it's how I grew up,
Yeah.
I appreciate and love pop songwriting, well-crafted, like stuff that, and even if there's glockenspiel and bells, like covering the melody, even if but somehow on my own stuff, I'm uncomfortable that I made some records like that.
Interesting.
And those are the most popular records that I've made. You know what I mean? Because they don't express fully, I guess, like where I live musically. I don't know if that makes sense.
But let me give you a frame of reference if it makes you feel any better. And this is over speaking to 920 something artists and musicians. The best songwriters, the number one thing they've all told me that I've walked away with is the value of having your foot in every kind of genre possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think you could be a songwriter at the level at which you are if you hadn't, if all you listen to is funk.
Yeah.
So
you might be able to, do that. I mean, you might have that one lane,
Right.
But pop by definition, and has always been ever evolving, is sort of taking like what's been done and go, oh, let's put a little bit, let's do it in this balance. No, let's pop more fun, a little bit of, it's always pop is an amalgamation of things. So I guess the more shit you're drawing from, the more informed, that informs your. Is that kind of what you mean? I mean,
yeah, totally. But what, as you're talking, I'm thinking, what? I do understand how you feel though, because you're also a New York dude who grew up in the 70s. You have an edge, and I mean that in the most loving way possible. Yeah. I mean, I like people like that. So, and I think I have an edge like that. So there's like a male, not, there's like a rough aspect of your character that you're happy with, so I get it. But man, let me tell you,
more identified with. And this goes to my, am I cutting you off or?
No, man, go ahead.
This goes to my dad thing and my dad thing. We know I have a dad thing.
The dad thing.
But so he grew up very street, Black Jewish ghetto, Baltimore, separated by train tracks. And his life, he came from that. He was very much associated with that. And the only music he cared about and what he came up writing, if you listen to early stuff, was all Black music,
Right.
It was all blues, and it was all in the stuff that he wrote when he was a kid, Kansas City and Hound Dog and all that stuff. He was not trying to write white pop. It was all right.
Yeah.
And he had that edge to him, and that's what he loved. And in the house, there was no white rock. There was none of that shit. His record collection was all, blues and R&B.
Right.
Great. Not even as much soul. There was some soul, but it was really blues. It was very and that's what I grew up with. That's what I knew he loved. It was a very specific thing. And that is in me so deeply. Those first records that I put on were all, it was all blues records and early R&B. And somewhere inside me, that's the real stuff. That's that's really the real stuff. So I remember playing him, and it's the last time I ever played him anything. I had just cut Paula track, right? I think it was Forever Your Girl. I didn't so he had heard The Way That You Love Me, and he dug that, right? That was a funky track. I had played him Forever Your Girl, super poppy, R&B pop, a la Borderline, Madonna, that kind of whatever, that. And he was always like, hey man, play me something, man. What you got? Play me something. He didn't want to talk about anything else other than business. He was just that old school. It's all about music business and the charts and give me something we could talk about. And he's like, play me something, man. And I knew better because with him, my whole life, it was like Lucy and Charlie Brown in the football, It's like, no, I swear to God, I'm holding the ball. I'm holding the ball, not playing from you. And every fucking time go to kick the ball. Like, and I would say to myself, remember that. Remember that. Like you're never going to get it from him. You're always going to feel like shit, no matter what. Yeah. Anyway, last time I did it, he's like, oh, you got anything? You like what you working on out there? And I went, oh, fuck. I thought the track sounded pretty good, right? So I play him. It's not mixed, but it's the rough. I think I might have even had her vocal. I don't know if I had her vocal on it or not, but I play him the track or the song Forever Your Girl, right? I play it, and this kind of silence at the end. So silence. I'm just like waiting. And he goes, yeah, that shit sounds Mickey Mouse, man.
Oh, my God. Oh. Lucy. In the football,
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, right. Man, I'm sorry that you had to deal with that.
It's okay. It's part of, we all, we all get our stuff. I think it's like we get born and someone knows this is going to be your stuff to unpack over the course of your life, and this is going to be your work. It's going to be what makes you who you are. In all of the great ways, and it's also going to be your, your cross.
And all the cross. Yeah. Right. Cross the bear.
And this is it. So here's your stuff. And so I daily continue to work with it, knowing this is what I've been given. And if this didn't happen, which is painful and it was hard, probably wouldn't be able to dig as deep in some ways or write or have the sensitivity, you're not going to be who you are unless you have, it's your, you know what I'm trying to say.
There's no free lunch. We all pay tuition.
No free lunch. And you want to you want to dig that deep. You want to play that way. You want to, okay, well, here's the price you got to pay,
No, but I will tell you that like my brother, all he wanted from my father was an attaboy. Never got it, and he wound up killing himself. So and whereas I wasn't looking for that, for whatever reason, I wanted to just get the fuck out of there. Mm-hmm. But when you're wanting those attaboys and you don't get them, they're painful, man. It's
dude. I so relate to what you said, and again, like never got the attaboy. Always wanted it. My brother and I were pretty good musicians at a very young age and great band. And had a lot of whatever, I was starting on the varsity baseball team as a freshman. Was a good baseball player, great player. Never came to a game.
Where'd you get to high school? This was not in Vermont.
Before I got sent away. So when I got sent away for junior, senior year. No,
where'd you go, freshmen?
The baseball team in Vermont, there were girls doing cartwheels in center field, and weaving daisy chain. I was like, fucking get me out of here! I am in hell, because I had actually come from a really good competitive sports school in the Bronx called.
Where'd you get it? Oh yeah, that's in Riverdale.
Yeah, that's the upper school. to
Right.
Local Culture, which was on 64th.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So senior year, I'm starting varsity, batting number one,
As a
playing
freshman, that's pretty awesome.
center field. Yeah.
That's so you're playing the power position,
Dude.
on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a good athlete. And it
Yeah.
was just at that point before music and perhaps smoking weed sort of like kind of like, yeah, come this way, Oliver. I was still able to pull off the athlete thing too. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
What was how do we get off in that?
We were just talking about
the Mickey Mouse thing and
yeah, your dad. That sounds kind of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, and so I have that guy internalized in my head. He's always here. He's always there, and to the degree that I can turn the volume maybe down to, if I can get him down to 2 or 3 to a low roar and turn up the volume of the sort of like more positive and, to the degree that I can like be creative and finish and write songs. Right. But that part of me that expressed that thing about the Paula songs.
Yeah.
Is really, and I caught myself, which is why I sort of shared the story with you. It's the part of me that goes, that shit's Mickey Mouse.
Yeah. Man, let me tell you, interesting. I listened to this story, man. So I hadn't spoken to my parents in 36 years, grew up in a highly, highly abusive environment.
Yeah.
I've done a lot. I did it, ACA. I don't know if I told you this, Adult Children of Alcoholics and I did that program. I've read books, therapy, my whole, I can't, every day I give thanks for that, Yeah. And I had forgiven my parents, didn't talk with them, but I had, for myself.
Yeah.
So they contacted me and I knew I could listen to me. He had dementia and he was not doing well. And I said, and they wanted to see me and I said, okay, so I saw them and they gave me not intentionally, they gave me the greatest gift ever. When you grow up in that environment, no matter how much work you do and how sort of aware you might be, there's a part of you, for me, that always feels that abuse you got was your fault, that there's something with you, that you were in some way. And when I met them as adults, this is just last year, they both passed right after that too. So this is, again, I think a higher power thing. In seeing them and seeing how, I don't know how to say this any other way, how they were very not intelligent. Very dumb people, emotionally, intellectually. Somehow I realized for the first time in my life, none of that was my fault. Mm. And it was like a 1,000,000-pound weight lifted off me. And it changed my whole identity of how I look at myself. Mm. And it was the greatest gift one of the great gifts, besides my wife and a couple other things, that I've ever received.
And that 335, 345?
Yeah. 335. Yeah, that's another great one. But so I understand that little Oliver in there yelling at you sometime. And so I really do get it.
Yeah,
I really do get it.
I wish it wasn't part of my story, but it's just part of my story. It's part of like just where I come from and who he was, and what it was like. I can add to it that it has been the case where it's so many like low points in my life, like in the middle, like a breakup in a restaurant and the girl walks off and I'm sitting there, or something else. Without fail, Stand By Me always comes on. It's like on top of it all, usually doom, doom, doom. Which is the irony of the sort of like the message of Stand By Me when this shit's blowing up in my face in my life, and he never particularly did, but the song comes on and it's just like, all right, God, yeah. Sense of humor.
Wow. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You need to get a sense of humor.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Wow. You mentioned your dad. Did you spend time with your mom after your folks split, or was she not in the picture?
No, so yeah, another perceptive thing. So my dad left when I was 10, and first of all, I was super identified with him. Again, like my mom, she was a German Jew, escaped the war.
Wow.
She went from Frankfurt to Amsterdam, literally was friends with Anne Frank, same age, got out of Amsterdam, came back. All this to say that she had a lot of trauma. Wasn't particularly very functional, and definitely not functional as a mom.
Yeah.
So that she really never, there was never really a bonding with her, because she really wasn't physically or mentally there a lot. She was just
totally get it.
This kind of shadowy figure. And she was also kind of had a super codependent relationship with my dad. It was all about him. And so she was just so when he left, there was this part of me that was like, uh-oh, there is nobody steering this ship here.
Yeah, of course.
With my mom. And even though my dad was scary and, he was a drinker, and he could be really scary, and I don't want to go too much into it, but there's a lot of trauma there around him and how he was. But even that felt more like a parent. Do you know what I'm saying?
Dude, we have very similar dynamics.
So
yes, I do.
Right. So I made this choice and it took a couple years actually, because he moved down to the village and he had a new wife and all this. But at a certain point, the place was ready, right? There was a place in the village, and I chose to live with him because I literally felt like, at least like getting yelled at feels like somebody at least cares, or there's someone on board, whereas my mom was just in the weeds. My brother ended up living with my mom. He stayed with her, and I ended up living with my dad until I got sent away to that boarding school when I was 16 or 17. So she was never really a part of my life in a lot of ways,
Yes, I totally understand that.
She's still alive.
Is she?
96 or 7.
Oh my God. Good genetics. Hopefully, you get your health genetics from your mom. So you're probably.
I want to be around that. I mean, all the enjoyable shit gone. Anyway, so that was your question, right? Just sort of like, where's your mom?
Yeah.
You know what? She had been an actress on Broadway. She was in this one famous cult film noir film called Kiss Me Deadly. That's like a very well-known culty film noir film. She was an actress, and the minute she met my dad and I think found someone that would take care of her, she was like, thank God, and she, I mean, I come from alcoholism on both sides. And unfortunately that's part of the story is, nobody was really on duty. But my dad's version of it, where he'd be gone, wouldn't see me, I could do it. And then all of a sudden, he'd rage on me because I was riding a skateboard. That at least felt like, that was parenting to me. I was like, okay, well, he's angry because I'm riding a skateboard. So that was more than I got from my,
No, I totally get it. I had a similar
thing. That makes sense.
Do you ever know who Gabor Mate is by any chance?
No, not Gabor, who did the jewelry.
No, Gabor Mate is a guy who's a trauma expert, right? And he has really good stuff to say, but he grew up his parents were in a concentration camp.
Right.
And he wound up doing these studies because he noticed that the kids who grew up as children of parents of survivors,
Yeah.
they were all fucked up because the parents had no bandwidth because I mean, what an unnatural thing to like, having kids is rough enough. How do you have a frame of reference of how do I get out of a fucking concentration camp? I mean, that's like, but so he's, yeah. So it's very common in that situation, man. Very common.
Yeah. Look, like I said, I mean, I feel like, and there are people that have way harder, bigger crosses to bear, whatever, but I always feel like I kind of got the Fiesta platter though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
No,
like,
I get it.
like just a bunch of things to work through,
Yeah. I do.
But on my mom's side, was the trauma from Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
She was traumatized. It was never talked about, but you feel that second generation trauma survivor. It's real. You know, it's real. So so put that on the plate next to the rice and beans, and, all the other shit. Yeah.
Honestly, man, all the more, again, I've said this because I know how tough it is to beat addiction, man. Fucking feather in your cap. Honestly, man.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And that accounts for, going back to that thing you were saying about people not understanding, like, that's your father, it's your mother. How can you not talk to them? At a certain point, you may realize, you realize what you need to do in order to survive and recover from where you came from. You're not blaming them, but you realize that a lot of the damage and the trauma and the problem comes from this family and system that you were born into. And that unless you can extricate yourself from it 1000%, for however long, and some people it's the rest of their lives, whatever, you're not gonna heal, and I knew that I needed some years between me and my family to just even begin to unpack, what it was like growing up and surviving it. Like I made it up to that plane to the Paul Masson one, like not a minute too fucking soon.
Yeah. Yeah. And they didn't do any work. So, and I have a program friend who's always saying, hey, nothing changes if nothing changes. So like, what are you going to do hanging around them? Like more of the same? Like they're not going to be like, hey, I'm really proud of you. They haven't done, they don't have the awareness. They just fucking can't get out of their own way.
Their denial that they can't even acknowledge that, that you're really a drug. You're not you just, it's like they can't even support what you're trying to do in your life.
Yeah.
So sometimes, and the thing about getting on that plane and going physically, away is important because it affords you the physical distance, affords you eventually the emotional distance that you need.
Yeah. Definitely, man. Awesome.
Yeah.
You've been sober 40 years and over 40 years now. What's the most important thing, Oliver, you might be able to pass along to someone listening to this who's either struggling or who's afraid to ask for help?
You don't have to ever feel this way again and live this way again. And you're not alone. As alone as you may be feeling and as desperate and hopeless as you may be feeling, you're not alone. And there are people that have been there just where you're at, and reach out, I mean, the people in AA saved my life, AA saved my life for sure. It's a hard first step to make, but there is help available and it's free. And there's people just like us, waiting for us there.
Thank you, man, because I have a lot of people sending me messages that are struggling from time to time. Thank you. Hey, which of your personality traits do you think contributed most to your success? And I don't just mean success in music. I mean success in music and in life.
Well, it's not the answer I would have thought that I would have come up with. I'm going to say sensitivity, because, and there's a sensitivity required in being a musician, with your ears and your choices and what are you tuned into, and how you play, and what you play and what you choose not to play, and your choice is all about, it has to do with sensitivity, and just with who I am with people and in my relationships. I don't know. I feel like I have, if nothing else, pretty sensitive to people's feelings, and I don't know. I think it makes me a good listener, and I don't know. I don't have a pat answer to that. It just feels to me like sensitivity, it's a component in music, in writing, in creating, in general. I think that's the key to any creative person. It's a sensitivity that you have. That not everybody, people are walking around with different skills and different gifts, but not necessarily that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's what's hitting me now.
Good.
Yeah.
Then that's the right answer.
Yeah.
What's your favorite song you wrote?
If
you have one.
Fuck. That's a really tough question for me. It's not even one that's ever come out.
I wouldn't. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. There's a song I wrote called Time Machine that was about my divorce, and or not necessarily about my divorce, but I wrote maybe 5-6 years after my divorce, and it's sort of about that and wrestling with that and regret. And I think that's my favorite song that I've written. It's not covered yet, but yeah. Maybe I'll throw the demo up on
I was gonna say, yeah.
Right?
That would be very cool. I'd love to hear it.
All right.
Tell me your top 3 Desert Island discs just for this moment, because this changes every day sometimes.
Oh my God. All right. Well, Sly, There's a Riot Going On.
Yeah, great.
You're saying like albums, right?
Yeah.
Well,
albums.
Sly. Oh God. Sergeant Pepper. What's the great one? Is it Blues at Sunrise, Albert?
By Albert King?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the album though. Yeah,
it's Blues at Sunrise, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think it is called Blues at Sunrise. Yeah.
It's the greatest blues guitar tone of all time.
Are you like Albert? I like Freddie better.
No, but the Three Kings. Yeah. I all day long. Freddie, Albert. You know who else I love though? That he doesn't seem like in the conversation enough to me. You know what I mean? Fucking Albert Collins.
He's not in the conversation, and I don't know why.
And that dude, and how melodic he is. Also, it's because he tunes differently and he's playing with the capo, but just like it's sophisticated and melodic and burning. And I mean, I don't know. I don't understand how somehow he's not. I mean, he's in my Mount Rushmore of guitar players.
Yeah, he's. Funny you mentioned him. I went through a catalog deep dive of his like maybe 6 months ago, and I was like, why don't I listen to this more? I mean, it was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of time. I mean, there's some footage, I can't remember what it is, where he's up there and he's on stage with all these great guitar players, and he's just killing them. Like, I mean, it's just like his intensity and his tone. It just,
great stage presence too. How he'd walk around and really affable guy.
Yeah.
Most important.
Diffs, yeah.
Oh, it's I said this several times. People sending comments like, "I love
3 things I wish I had said," but whatever.
I know people sending comments like, "I love how people will talk about all this tragedy in their life, but when you ask them, give me your 3 best CDs, it's like, oh my god,
Family,
yeah, the Monkees,
yeah."
Most important lessons you've learned from getting older.
You can't take any of this with you, and it's about love.
Yeah, man.
Period. It's the beginning, the middle, and the end is about love. Great
answer, man. Here's a tough one. What do you like most about yourself?
And
it could be several things.
Yeah. I think I got a good heart. I think I'm a pretty loving guy, yeah, I don't know, I guess so. I mean, I think I'm a decent human. I'm flawed, but I do believe that like I'm genuinely coming from a good place with people.
Thank you. Oh, what's your best childhood memory?
Wow. Well, best childhood memory. Childhood is like, we're talking like 12 years old, like childhood.
No, I was, whatever you like, man. It's your question. You could, whatever you like.
Oh, the only thing I could think of is like when like Zippy the Chimp came to my 10th birthday party.
Was that like Mr. Jiggs or something like that?
Well, literally, if you go back, you can probably find him. He was like they probably replaced Zippy's. The Zippy might have died and another Zippy came, but it wasn't Zippy the Chimp. And I think,
oh my God,
somebody brought him in to the Brill Building, to my dad's day to like, as a stunt for somebody else. And it was like, he roller skated or whatever. He was like on the Ed Sullivan shows. Anyway, my dad got the idea. It was probably like around my birthday that he was going to have Zippy the Chimp come to my birthday party. So I even have a picture of it like somewhere.
Of you and Zippy?
Me eating birthday cake and Zippy the Chimp. That was pretty much the greatest thing ever.
That's so funny.
Chimp in the apartment and roller skating and painting and sitting next to me for my birthday. I mean, that was like the bomb. That was the best.
Awesome. Bubbles had nothing on Zippy.
Fuck yeah. Zippy was OG. The OG.
Do you have any hobbies outside of music and sports?
No. Yeah. Well, the closest thing I would say would be scuba diving, which
cool.
I don't know if, yes, it's a hobby. I mean, I don't do it nearly as much as I would like, but I've been an avid diver since I think I got certified in like 1980, 6.
Oh, wow. That's a long
So I've
time.
been certified that long, and got my advanced certification, and I've done a lot of live aboard, 10-day, 2-week kind of dive
Well, that's
trip to
real.
some
That's
really cool locations. Went diving in the Galapagos,
oh, wow.
all over. I did the Red Sea about a year and a half ago in Egypt. I love diving.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty big
yeah,
commitment
yeah,
going
and
all over
it's
the world. That's
exciting,
awesome.
and it's sort of it's just I love it. So diving, but really, it's like music. It's what I do, and it's what I love, and it's my hobby, and it's sort of like it feels like more like of a way of being in the world.
Yeah, it's a way. Yeah, right. It's your
Anything,
lifestyle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm not someone that's like, I can't wait for my job to be over so I can go play guitar. You know.
Yeah, yeah. You're. I saw on some video you work out regularly. You had a trainer or something like that there too.
No, you know what's really funny? First of all, I
What?
don't, and I stopped, and I probably haven't worked out since that interview, which was like a year ago, maybe. I
Oh,
have my first workout in a year at 2:30 today. Like
oh
literally,
my God.
I have planned. Which, and of course, I've had nothing to eat. I just ate a bar, but I've been
God,
talking.
after everything we've just talked about, you'll be exhausted. You're gonna go in there like, look, man, can we do this tomorrow?
And it's kind of more of it's sort of boxing. So
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
I am
Still.
not in good shape at this point, but
All right.
for a lot of my life, I've sort of been in decent shape.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you seem like you're in great shape, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
Hmm. It kind of comes back to the same thing I said before. I think it was my grandfather who came over from Germany, and he would say, anything you can buy with money is cheap.
Oh, fuck, that's pretty heavy, actually. Yeah, that's a great one. I wrote that down. That's a good one, man. 2 more questions, and I cannot thank you enough. Like
Sure, man.
I'm so happy that I got to talk with you, man, and I hope we get to have a meal together sometime.
I would love that. Yeah. There's no shortage of things we can go into any number of
Yeah, I'll just shut up and just
with
keep
you.
listening.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about this, but it's a little more specific. If you don't have an answer for it, it's cool. So my
Okay.
question was, how have you managed to reconcile the negative voices you may have heard earlier in life regarding your personal success or comparing yourself with your dad? And
Right.
if you have been able to, what have been the most helpful ways you've been able to reconcile those voices?
Oh, I mean, that is such a good question, such a deep question, and such a relevant question. And I don't know. I mean, that we could do a whole
Maybe we should. You should be like,
series
yeah.
It has been a multi-pronged attack, or to
Fair
try
enough.
deal with and manage and wrestle to the ground, or somehow integrate those negative voices that were so ingrained in me so early on and so loud that it will be a lifelong process, which is something that I'm coming to terms with. And that's part of realizing, like, this may not go away. It's, here's the shift. Here's the little bit of judo, which is the voices are never going to go away. The thing I am continually trying to do and remind myself of is not to identify as the voices.
Yeah.
To literally say, those are those voices. There's that story. There's that narrative, but that's not me. That's an old story. Those are old, voices and ideas born out of early childhood experiences, born out of trauma, born out of, like the pain in some ways that we've talked about coming from families that, right? And that is not the truth. And that's not who I am. So for me, getting sober was the very first step.
Yeah.
You can't even begin to address that stuff unless, if you're checking out and numbing out and just searching for oblivion, then you can't even, entertain those questions, right?
Of course.
Your answer is to check out. So getting sober was one. Man, I've had to do so many different kinds of therapies, to be honest with you. I've done therapy around trauma. We didn't get into it, all of it, physical, all kinds of emotional, but physical trauma. Like, you had it too, sounds like coming from where you came from. So 100%. I've had to do EMDR therapy, which is, people can look into that if they want. I continue to do somatic therapy. When you have trauma, basically, Elvis leaves the building. It's like when you're a little kid and you're frightened out of your fucking mind by, I don't know if it's your alcoholic father, this monster. Literally, the way you protect yourself is you dissociate and you leave. You leave the building, right? So, like, I've had to and continue to have to learn how to check in with my body and even know what's going on with it. I still start. So that's like somatic work. Because apparently that's where all the trauma is stored, is in your body. That's a whole other, the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Body Keeps the Score, yeah.
So there's all of that. So for me, it's like, it's like I said, a multi-pronged. It's like sober, doing trauma work, whether it's EMDR, somatic work, talk therapy. I've been a meditator for 18 years. I do TM. Transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
And I read and listen to a lot of, I guess what you would call spiritual sort of material and things that I am just continually trying to put in my head and in my mind, things that feel like the antidote and the counter to the nonstop, motion and momentum of the story that I've been living with,
Yeah.
And it literally is daily, man. It's daily. The times in my life when I presented much differently than I have, I think, in this discussion with you, where I kind of had a persona and I could hide, and I would hide behind it. And,
well, it was scary to let people in.
Yeah.
Fucking that never ends well.
Yeah. Doesn't end well. So, yeah. There were times when
you got to work at
rolling around 20 pounds heavier, yoked on my bike, mad dogging you, cause that's how fucking scared I was.
Yeah. Sure.
And that didn't work. And you get to a certain point in your life when you're like, well, I'm either going to go out this way and this doesn't feel comfortable, or what's the alternative? Let me try and heal,
Yeah.
For me, it's like fucking takes a village. It takes all of that. And
it does,
so I think I answered the question, but
man,
there's no one thing. It's,
no.
But the thing that's key is to realize that you are not your ego.
Right.
Your ego is this personality that has been formed. It's the voice you're always hearing in your head, but but it's been formed by all the things that happen in your life, and it's always trying to keep you safe. That's its job. The ego's job is to keep you safe, right? And if you haven't had the experience of having had a very safe upbringing, it's going to be telling you, Oh, that motherfucker's not safe. Oh, don't do that. That's not, no, keep it to yourself. Everything's the end of, and if you listen to your ego, ultimately you end up in the fetal position in your room in the dark.
Yeah.
That's what it's telling you. It's the only place that's safe.
The only place that's safe. Yes.
You need to identify with another part of yourself, which is the bigger self, and I feel like I'm
you're good, man. That's good.
Into areas that maybe we don't have time to go into.
It was awesome. Thank you. I actually started talking to little Craig. That I found incredibly helpful because he's the guy that's wounded most of the time. Not me. Yeah.
When I'm really in it and I can catch myself. See, as an adult, like you might think like something's happening and you're in your adult life and you want to fucking kick this dude's ass or you just, and what you don't realize until you get to this point is like, that's really like a very young reaction that goes away, but what I find myself saying to myself a lot and catching myself when fear or something, I'm like, I got you, little guy.
Yeah. Right.
I got you. And that's the part of me that's like a father, and been a father and been a functioning adult and kicking ass in areas of my life and working hard. Like that voice, that guy, that's the adult that can stop it, interrupt it immediately and go, I got you. Like you said.
Yeah.
It's a phrase because it takes me right to the place where I'm no longer in that panic or fear because I realize that's a very old reaction by a very frightened kid.
Yeah. But it's so important to know that because it allows you to mitigate all that shit instead of like, you're up in bed and you're never fucking sleeping. If you have that a little bit of awareness, you could sort of like cut it off at the pass and then, spend 10 minutes and like, I got, and then we can move on the rest of our day or night or whatever.
Well, it took me years to even quiet the voices in my head that would say, "Oh, you fucking pussy! What, you're gonna heal your inner child now? Is that what you're gonna do?" Like just like brutal. Like that was somehow. Yeah. So to get to a place in my life where it was like, yeah, you know what? I actually am.
Yeah.
And you need to like go lie by the pool, motherfucker.
Good for you.
Yeah.
That was a great answer. Thank you. And the last question is, Oliver, what's been the biggest change in your personality, would you say, over the last 10 years? And how much of that change is intentional and versus just being a natural part of aging?
Well, softening. And it's all tied into everything we're saying. Like I said, I wouldn't admit 90% of what I've shared with you, in this interview or say these things 10, 15 years ago. And I'll tell you is having daughters, a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, having kids and realizing that I can't be the father that I want to be to these children, to these girls, unless I soften. I can't be present. I can't be available. I can't be the man that I want them to be, the first man that they fall in love with. So that's what they choose, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to go looking for, unless I start peeling these fucking layers off and start healing and softening. And I hate the word softening. It's like, there's a part of me, as I say it today, when I say softening, it's like, I want to fucking.
Yeah, I get it.
Right. But that's the work.
But that's the word though. Being softer with yourself, being softer with others, yourself, first of all, most important.
Yeah.
Your daughters, everything.
How you treat people and how you love people, it's coming from yourself, Yeah. So if you don't have it for yourself and you talk to yourself this way, I would hear things coming out going, holy yeah. my desire to be a better father and a more loving father has forced me to soften. And
good for you, man.
That's the most succinct way I can put it.
Play this for your daughters in 10 years and they'll appreciate it. They won't appreciate it before that.
Fuck no.
Let me tell you, my son came to me when he was like 25 and he goes, you know what? I fucking hated it when I was younger because you always were right. I really hated you. He goes, now I'm just realize that it was a good thing, Dad. I'm like, okay, thank you. You know, but they don't come around until he's 25, 25, 27, that's, so being a dad is a painful job, man.
It's a thankless job, man. And, thankless job.
It is until you
flows in one direction at this point, I think is.
And, right.
And you can have an expectation of it. And one of the things you learn is like, you can't come to your kids with that needy kid inside of you wanting to be loved and reflected back in the way that, you know what I mean? It's like you that's out the window.
Especially your kids that age, you're in a rough period now, especially with girls. Yeah, I've been there. It's very rough, man. Yeah. Hey, listen.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
I just wanted to, first of all, thank you again. I really enjoyed talking to you. I really hope we get to meet you and Keith Nelson, go have some good pizza, not that shit you're eating out in LA.
Yeah, we can't stay in California.
Let me tell people where to find you. So Oliver, if you are interested in work with Oliver in a production capacity or in a song collaboration capacity, what you do is go to his Instagram and you just look up Oliver Leiber, Leiber, and message him on Instagram or Facebook. Send him like some tracks. Send him what you're doing so he could have a frame of reference to look at it and say, let's explore, let's have a phone call to discuss it or not. You can't just say, hey, I'd like you to produce me. And then you send nothing. That's not a valid request for anybody. So just be considerate and just send him the information that you'd want if you're in his situation for production or writing. If you're interested in hiring Oliver to work with you as a session player on guitar or drums, same thing, just DM him on Instagram or message him on Facebook. Also, he's part of a really cool band called the Bayonets with Brian Ray from Paul McCartney's band. And I'm sorry, what's your singer's name?
Oh, Lucrecia Sanz Lopez from Argentina.
Yes. Yeah. And they have been profiled on Little Steven's Little Steven from Springsteen's band on his Underground Garage. He's got a very popular. It's on Sirius, I think, right?
Yeah.
Sirius. So they have won the coolest song in the world several times, and now there's a vote going on for who's the coolest song of all the coolest songs
for the year.
This is for the year.
Yeah.
So my personal request is if you would all support Oliver, that would be awesome. So just look up Little Steven's Garage and how to vote for the coolest song in the world or coolest song of the year, and vote for the Bayonets. And the name of the track is, Argentina. Oliver's also in a sort of it's called the Minneapolis Funk All-Stars. It's kind of like all the members of The Time and Prince's bands over the years. Various people go in and out and they play. And so look up Minneapolis Funk All-Stars and you can see the touring schedule. Go check him out when he's in your area. And I'm pretty sure you're going to have a great time listening to him in the band. Is there anything else? How can I pimp you some more? I mean, anything?
I'm good. I don't need to be pimped. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, man. Same here. Feeling
I didn't know really what to expect, and it was really a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, man. Same here. Very much.
Thanks for having me to do this.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for coming on. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to wrap up here and then you and I will chat. I want to say, everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your socials with your friends. I want to thank a huge debt of gratitude to Oliver Leiber, and thanks again to Keith Nelson for connecting us. You don't get to have It's a privilege and an honor for someone to have a conversation with me like this, and opens up, and I learn so much. And I know a lot of people listening feel the same way. So thanks, Oliver. And most important, man, remember that happiness is a choice. So choose wisely. Be nice, go play guitar, and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I am out. Oliver, brother, thank you for everything, man.
Thank you.